me? Why would they leave me? What am I gonna do now? No, it can't be true. Flight 453 now boarding at gate B12. I need to go home. Right now. I just don't know where I am. Can you help me? Oh my God. I can't believe it's you. You look just like him. I know. I've been waiting for you.
My daughter left me standing outside Richmond International Airport, with one suitcase, my purse, and a boarding pass I would soon discover was useless. "Wait here, Mom," Melissa had said. "I'll fix the reservation and come right back." 20 minutes later, her car was gone. Then my phone buzzed. "Mom, I'm sorry. I can't do this anymore. Please find your own way home." At 68 years old, I had never felt so foolish. I dragged my suitcase inside and approached the airline counter, trying not to cry. The agent took my driver's license, glanced at it, and suddenly stopped. "Cooper," she whispered. Then she looked straight at me. "Were you married to Thomas Cooper?" My hand tightened around the counter. Because my husband had been dead for 6 years, and I had never seen this woman before. Before I tell you what she knew about my husband, and why my daughter had really brought me to that airport, please like this video and subscribe if stories about family betrayal and finding your strength speak to you. And tell me in the comments, what would you have done if your own child left you there? I'd also love to know where you're watching from, and what time it is there. The trip that never existed. 3 days before my daughter left me standing outside Richmond International Airport with a suitcase and a boarding pass that meant nothing. I was in my kitchen making toast when Melissa called. "Mom, what are you doing next Thursday?" I glanced at the calendar hanging beside the refrigerator. Dentist at 10. Grocery store afterward. Why cancel both? I laughed. At 68, those are practically the highlights of my social life. "I'm serious. I have a surprise." There was something in her voice I hadn't heard in a long time. Lightness. "What kind of surprise?" "We're going to Charleston." I stopped spreading strawberry preserves. "We, you and me. 4 days. No husbands, no responsibilities, no paperwork. Just us." For a moment I couldn't answer. Melissa and I hadn't taken a trip alone together since she was 23. More importantly, we hadn't felt truly close in years. When she was a little girl, we were inseparable. She used to sit on the bathroom counter while I got ready for work, swinging her legs and telling me every detail of her life. At 16, she still crawled into my bed when thunderstorms frightened her. At 21, she called me from college because a professor had criticized a paper she'd worked on for weeks. Then adulthood arrived. Marriage, bills, careers, disappointments. Our conversations became shorter. After my husband Thomas died 6 years earlier, Melissa came back into my life with tremendous force. At first, I was grateful. Grief had turned simple decisions into exhausting tasks. I could manage numbers I had spent almost 30 years as a bookkeeping manager, but grief wasn't a number that could be reconciled. Some mornings I opened Thomas's closet simply to smell his jackets. Sometimes I made 2 cups of coffee before remembering there was nobody across the table to drink the second. Melissa helped. She organized insurance paperwork. She drove me to appointments after cataract surgery. She helped cancel accounts that remained in Thomas's name. She labeled folders in large letters so I could find everything easily. Mom taxes, Mom insurance, Mom medical, Mom important documents. At the time, it felt like love. Eventually, however, something changed. The questions became more frequent. "Did you pay the property taxes?" "Yes." "Are you sure?" "Yes, Melissa." "Did you check the bank statement? I balanced accounts before you learned multiplication." She would laugh. "I'm only trying to help." And I believed her, mostly. But there were moments when helping began to feel suspiciously like managing. If I mentioned replacing my kitchen countertops, she wanted to know the cost. When I booked a weekend trip with 2 women from church, Melissa insisted on having the hotel information. When I bought a new television, she asked whether I had compared prices first. Once, after I told her I had donated money to a local food pantry, she said, "Mom, you need to think about preserving your assets." My assets. The phrase irritated me. I had worked for decades. Thomas had worked even longer. Yet somehow my money had become something I was expected to preserve rather than use. Still, Melissa was my only child. I knew her intentions were good. At least I wanted to believe they were. So when she said Charleston, I heard more than a vacation invitation. I heard an opportunity. Maybe she missed me. Maybe I missed her more than I admitted. 4 days, I asked. Thursday through Monday. What about Eric? He can survive without me. And work, I took time off. I smiled. All right. All right meaning yes, yes. She squealed like the teenager I remembered. That sound alone was enough to erase months of tension. That afternoon, I rescheduled my dentist appointment. The following morning, I drove to Short Pump and bought comfortable walking shoes, sunscreen, and a pale blue blouse I absolutely did not need. Thomas used to say blue made my eyes look brighter. When I got home, I opened the hallway closet and pulled down his old camera. It was a bulky digital camera from another era. My phone took better photographs, but Thomas had loved that camera. He photographed everything: sunsets, airplanes, coffee cups, strangers' dogs, me when I wasn't paying attention. I slipped it into my suitcase. For the first time in months, I felt excited. Melissa came over Wednesday evening. She arrived carrying her laptop and a leather tote. Almost ready, she asked. Completely. Medication packed. Insurance card, yes. Driver's license, yes. She nodded. Good. I watched her open the laptop at my kitchen table. What are you doing checking tomorrow? What about tomorrow? Flights, hotel, everything. What hotel are we staying at? Her fingers paused. Harbor something. I laughed. You booked a hotel and don't remember the name. I've had a crazy week. Send me the confirmation. I already did. No, you didn't. She looked at her email. Huh. What, I must have forgotten. Then send it now. I will. She didn't. Instead, she closed one window and opened another. I noticed because Melissa was usually obsessive about travel details. She once made a 3-page itinerary for a weekend in Williamsburg. What airline? I asked. Mom, what, you're interrogating me? I asked what airline we're flying. She sighed. I have everything handled. Something about her answer bothered me. Not enough to frighten me. Enough to notice. Then she asked, did you ever find Dad's old trust paperwork? I looked up. What trust paperwork? The stuff from Cooper Aviation. Thomas had founded Cooper Aviation Services with a business partner when Melissa was young. It handled aircraft maintenance, ground equipment, and support services for regional operators. He sold his operating interest decades ago. Afterward, he rarely discussed the company. Why are you thinking about that? I asked. Melissa shrugged. We were organizing your records, remember, months ago. I know. And what does Thomas's old company have to do with Charleston? Nothing. Then why ask? She closed the laptop halfway. Because you never know when old financial records might matter. That sounds suspiciously like something an accountant would say. She smiled, but her eyes didn't. Do you know where they are? Probably in Thomas's desk. Originals. I don't know. Do you have copies of the trust? Now I was paying attention. Melissa, why do you care? She leaned back. I don't care. I'm trying to help you organize things. My things are organized. You don't even know where the trust documents are. I know where my coffee cups are. That's enough organization for tonight? She laughed. The tension passed. Or perhaps I allowed it to pass. Before leaving, she touched my shoulder. Tomorrow is going to be good for us. I hope so. It will. At the door, she turned. One more thing. What, make sure you bring your driver's license. I stared at her. You've asked me 3 times. I don't want us getting to the airport and discovering you forgot it. I have flown before. I know. She kissed my cheek. 7:15 tomorrow. After she left, I stood in the quiet kitchen thinking about Thomas's trust. Curiosity got the better of me. I went into his study. The room had changed very little since his death. His wooden desk still faced the window. His reading glasses remained inside the top drawer. I opened the lower locked drawer with the small brass key I kept upstairs. Inside were folders from decades of our life together: insurance, property, taxes, business records. Near the back, I found one labeled Cooper Family Trust. I pulled it out. It was thick. I remembered signing documents years earlier, but Thomas had handled most of the details. I opened the folder. There were old statements, amendments, correspondence, and references to Cooper Aviation Holdings. For perhaps 30 seconds, I considered reading everything. Then I heard Melissa's voice in my head. "Do you have copies of the trust?" I suddenly felt uncomfortable. Why would she ask specifically about copies? I closed the folder. The next morning, Melissa arrived precisely at 7:15. She seemed cheerful. Too cheerful, I would later think. But that morning, I wanted to believe the trip was real. We loaded my suitcase into her SUV. I noticed she didn't remove her own luggage from the house. "Where's your suitcase already in the back?" I glanced through the tinted rear window but couldn't see much. As we drove toward the airport, Melissa kept checking her phone. Every few minutes another message arrived. Finally I asked, "Is Eric bothering you?" "No." "Work?" "Yes." "I thought you were on vacation." "I am." Her phone buzzed again. She turned it face down. A few miles later she asked, "You definitely brought your ID." I stared at her. "Melissa, what fourth time?" "Sorry." "And you have my boarding pass?" "Yes." "What time is the flight?" 10:40. I smiled. Finally an answer. She didn't smile back. Something tightened in my stomach. I ignored it. That was my mistake. At the airport, Melissa followed signs for departures. "Why aren't we parking? I need to straighten something out with the reservation." "What happened?" "Nothing serious." She pulled to the curb. Then she got out and opened the back. My suitcase came out. Only mine. "Where's yours?" I asked. "In there." "Then get it." "Mom, just wait here." She placed my suitcase beside me. "I'll handle the reservation and come right back." "Why can't I go with you?" "It'll be easier this way." Then Melissa hugged me. Not a quick hug. She wrapped both arms around me and held on. When she pulled away, her eyes were wet. "Melissa, what's wrong?" "Nothing. You look like you're going to cry." "I love you, Mom." "I love you too." But she climbed back into the SUV. 2 minutes. Then she drove away. I stood beside my suitcase watching her disappear into airport traffic. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. Then 20. I called. No answer. Finally my phone buzzed. A text from Melissa. "Mom, I'm sorry. I can't do this anymore. Please find your own way home." I read it once. Then again. I still believed there had to be an explanation. I still believed there was a hotel in Charleston. I still believed there was a boarding pass with my name on it. And I had no idea that hidden beneath the clothes in the suitcase beside me was an envelope that would make me question every conversation I'd had with my daughter for months. What the airline agent knew. The airline agent stared at my driver's license for so long that I wondered whether something was wrong with it. "Cooper," she finally said. "Yes." She looked up at me, then back at the license. "Vivian Cooper." "That's me." Her expression changed in a way I couldn't immediately understand. It wasn't suspicion. It looked more like surprise mixed with recognition. Then she asked the question that made everything around me seem quieter. "Were you married to Thomas Cooper?" My fingers tightened around the handle of my suitcase. "Yes." The word came out more softly than I intended. "Thomas was my husband." The agent inhaled. "My goodness." I stared at her name badge. "Denise Walker." "I'm sorry," I said. "Do I know you?" "No, ma'am. We've never met." "Then how do you know my husband?" Her face softened. "My father worked for him." I said nothing. "Cooper Aviation Services," she added. That name reached backward through nearly 30 years of my life. Before Thomas became the man who spent Saturday mornings fixing cabinet hinges and complaining about squirrels in the bird feeder, he had been Thomas Cooper of Cooper Aviation Services. He and a business partner had built the company when Melissa was still a child. They didn't fly passengers. Their company maintained aircraft-serviced ground equipment and provided specialized support for regional carriers and private operators. During the busiest years, Thomas sometimes left home before sunrise. He would return smelling faintly of machine oil and coffee, talking about landing gear maintenance contracts, hangar leases, and employees whose families I knew mostly through stories. Then, after years of long hours, he sold his operating interest. I remembered the celebration dinner. Thomas raised his glass and said, "Viv, I finally get to belong to my family again." As far as I understood, that was the end of Cooper Aviation. Apparently, I was wrong. My father's name is Samuel Walker, Denise said. He supervised maintenance. Sam Walker. Her eyes widened. You remember him? Thomas talked about Sam constantly. I could almost hear my husband's voice. Sam says we need another mechanic. Sam thinks the compressor is going to die. Sam caught a problem before an inspection. Denise smiled. My father still talks about Mr. Cooper. Something inside me softened. That morning had been filled with humiliation, but hearing Thomas remembered with affection felt like someone had unexpectedly opened a door into a room I thought had been locked forever. How is your father retired? 79 and still convinced nobody under 60 knows how to maintain an engine. I laughed. That sounds exactly like the Sam Thomas described. Denise laughed too. Then she glanced at my suitcase. I'm sorry. You came here because there was a problem. Reality returned. Yes. I looked toward the terminal entrance, still half expecting Melissa to appear. My daughter and I are supposed to be flying to Charleston today at 10:40. Do you have your confirmation? My daughter has it. Denise waited. She told me to wait outside while she fixed something with our reservation. And she's inside somewhere. My throat tightened. No. I pulled out my phone and showed her the text. Mom, I'm sorry. I can't do this anymore. Please find your own way home. Denise read it once. Her expression became professional again. She left. I watched her drive away. I'm sorry. I'm sure there's some explanation. Even as I said it, I hated how desperate I sounded. She probably got overwhelmed. Denise didn't contradict me. Let's find your reservation. She turned toward the computer. Do you have the confirmation number? No email. Melissa was supposed to send everything last night. I opened my inbox. Nothing. What airline did she tell you? I named the airline. Denise nodded. That's us. Give me a moment. Her fingers moved across the keyboard. I stood there clutching my purse. She typed my name, paused, checked my identification again, typed something else. Her forehead tightened. What I asked. I'm still searching. Another minute passed. Then she asked for my date of birth. I gave it. She tried again. Finally, she looked at me. Mrs. Cooper, I'm not finding a reservation under your name. My stomach dropped. Maybe Melissa misspelled something. Possibly. She searched variations. Vivian Cooper. Vivian E. Cooper. Cooper Vivian. Nothing. Could it be under my daughter's reservation? If you were traveling together, your passenger record would still exist. What if she canceled it this morning? There should normally be a record associated with the booking. I swallowed. Can you see whether there was ever a ticket? I'm not finding one through the information you've given me. I pulled the little notebook from my purse. I had written everything Melissa told me. Charleston. 10:40. Thursday. Return Monday. Could you check the flight Denise did? There are itineraries that could get you to Charleston around that period, but you aren't booked on them. I stared at the notebook. The handwriting was mine. The information had come from Melissa. For 3 days, I had prepared for a trip that apparently existed only in my daughter's words. Would you like to sit down? I'm fine. I wasn't. Denise pointed toward a row of seats near the windows. I sat. A few minutes later, she brought me water. I felt embarrassed by the kindness. I must look ridiculous. You don't. My daughter invented a vacation and dropped me at an airport. We don't know the whole story yet. I looked at her. But we know I don't have a ticket. Yes. That single word removed another layer of denial. I watched families moving through the terminal. A little boy hugged his grandmother. A couple argued quietly over luggage. A woman rushed toward security carrying coffee in one hand and a toddler's backpack in the other. Everyone seemed to know where they were going. I didn't. Thomas would have noticed something was wrong, I said. Denise sat beside me. What do you mean he was good at reading people? I was good at reading numbers. You worked in finance, bookkeeping manager. Nearly 30 years. She smiled. My father said Mr. Cooper used to brag that his wife could find a missing dollar faster than an entire accounting department. I laughed despite myself. He did say things like that. For a few seconds, Thomas felt close. Then Denise said, You know, Cooper Aviation didn't exactly disappear, right? I turned toward her. What after Mr. Cooper sold his operating interest, the company changed hands. Then parts of it went through mergers and acquisitions. I knew there were changes. My father followed them for years. I thought the company was basically gone. The name is gone. She paused. But parts of the business became part of a much larger aviation services corporation. I frowned. Thomas had received occasional business correspondence after the sale. I remembered annual envelopes arriving, sometimes checks, sometimes thick packets he would read in his study. I rarely asked questions. We had shared finances, but we also respected each other's areas of responsibility. Does the successor company still exist? Yes. Where before? Denise could answer. Another employee called her. I'll be right back. I nodded. As she returned to the counter, my phone rang. Melissa. My heart leaped. Melissa, silence. Melissa, where are you? The call disconnected. I stared at the screen. Then I called back. Straight to voicemail. Melissa, please call me. I'm at the airport. There is no reservation in my name. I ended the call. 30 seconds later, a text appeared. I'm sorry, Mom. I need time. I immediately typed, time for what, where are you delivered? No answer. Then my phone chimed again. This notification came from my email. Airline purchase receipt. At first I assumed it was somehow my missing reservation. I opened it. The passenger name stopped me. Melissa Grant. I blinked. Years earlier, Melissa had used my email address while helping me create a travel rewards account. Somehow a transaction notification had reached that address. I scrolled. Departure Airport Richmond International. Today. Passenger Melissa Grant. Destination Dallas-Fort Worth. I stared at the screen. Dallas, not Charleston. The purchase date was even more disturbing. The ticket had been booked late the previous night, after Melissa had sat at my kitchen table asking about Thomas's trust. After she had promised we were leaving for Charleston together. I stood so quickly my purse slid from my lap. Denise was returning. Mrs. Cooper. I know where my daughter is going. I handed her my phone. She read the receipt. Dallas. Yes. Her face became very still. I recognized that expression. It was the look people wear when they know something they aren't sure they should say. What? Denise handed back my phone. Probably nothing. What is it? She hesitated. The company I mentioned. The one that absorbed part of Cooper Aviation. Yes. What about it? Its headquarters are in the Dallas area. For a moment, neither of us spoke. I felt a cold sensation move from the back of my neck down my arms. Melissa had asked about Thomas's trust documents. She had repeatedly made sure I carried identification. She had claimed to have my boarding pass. She had brought me to an airport for a vacation that apparently never existed. And she had secretly purchased a ticket to the city where the successor to Thomas's company was headquartered. I wanted to dismiss it as coincidence, but I had spent almost 30 years working with financial records. Numbers taught me something people often didn't. One unusual item could be an error. Two could be coincidence. But when several unrelated details began pointing in the same direction, you stopped making excuses and started looking for the connection. Did Thomas still have anything to do with that company after he sold? I asked. I honestly don't know, Denise said. My father might. Did he own shares? I wouldn't know that. Did employees ever talk about some kind of trust? She shook her head. I was young when most of this happened. Of course, I was asking the wrong person. The answers were probably sitting somewhere inside Thomas's old desk. Then I remembered Melissa standing in my kitchen the previous evening. Do you have copies of the trust, not the will? Not our tax returns. The trust. I looked down at my suitcase. For the first time, the entire trip felt different. Maybe Charleston hadn't been canceled. Maybe Charleston had never existed. Maybe the vacation had simply been a story designed to get me dressed, packed, carrying identification and away from my house. But why? And why leave me at the airport instead of taking me somewhere else? Something must have changed. Something Melissa hadn't expected. I picked up my suitcase. I'm going home. Denise touched my arm gently. Mrs. Cooper. Yes, my father still has boxes from his Cooper aviation days. I looked at her. If you want, I can ask him what he remembers. Please do. She wrote her number on the back of an airline card and handed it to me. I put it carefully inside my purse. Then I started toward the exit. With every step, I felt less like the confused mother who had been abandoned on a curb. I felt like the woman who had spent decades finding discrepancies. Other people hoped she wouldn't notice. My daughter had lied about Charleston. She had lied about my ticket. And now she was on her way to Dallas. I didn't yet know what she wanted from Thomas's past. But I was beginning to understand one thing. Melissa hadn't left me at that airport because she suddenly decided she didn't want to travel with me. She had brought me there for a reason. And whatever that reason was, it had something to do with the name the airline agent had recognized. Cooper. The envelope in my suitcase. I left Denise's counter with one thought repeating in my mind. Go home. I needed familiar walls around me. I needed Thomas's desk, his files, the old records Melissa had been asking about. Most of all, I needed distance from the airport where every rolling suitcase reminded me that everyone except me seemed to have a destination. I made it halfway toward the exit before I remembered my blood pressure medication. It was packed in the small interior pocket of my suitcase. I stopped near a quieter seating area beside a large window overlooking the runway. For a moment, I watched an airplane rise into the gray Virginia sky. Was Melissa already on hers? Was she sitting comfortably with a coffee, while I stood there trying to understand why my daughter had lied to me? I lowered my suitcase onto an empty chair. The zipper resisted. I frowned. I had packed the bag myself, carefully. After Thomas died, I became particular about small things. Maybe because death teaches you how quickly the large things can become uncontrollable. I knew exactly where everything had been. Walking shoes on the bottom, slacks rolled along one side, blue blouse folded on top, Thomas's camera wrapped in a cardigan, medication in the interior pocket. When I finally pulled the zipper, the first thing I noticed was the blouse. It wasn't on top. It had been pushed toward one side. I stared at it. Maybe I had moved it that morning. Except I remembered placing it there. I reached for my medication. My hand brushed against something stiff beneath the cardigan. Paper. I moved the sweater. A large cream-colored envelope was lying flat underneath. My name was written across the front. V. Cooper Trust Documents. I knew the handwriting immediately. Melissa. I sat down. For several seconds I didn't touch the envelope. A strange thought passed through my mind. Maybe this explains everything. Maybe Melissa had planned some financial appointment in Charleston. Maybe she had put the papers in my suitcase because she intended to discuss them during the trip. But that explanation collapsed almost immediately. There was no Charleston ticket. Melissa was flying to Dallas, and she had never told me the envelope existed. I picked it up. It was thick enough to contain perhaps 20 pages. Opening it felt wrong. Then I looked again at my own name, my suitcase, my husband's trust. I slid my finger beneath the flap. The first page carried a heading I recognized, Cooper Family Trust. My heart began beating harder. I had seen that name the night before when I opened Thomas's desk. The next page contained references to legacy equity holdings associated with Cooper Aviation Services and successor entities. I read slowly. Legal language had always irritated me. Thomas could read 3 pages of contracts and somehow understand what mattered. I preferred columns. Numbers were honest if you knew where to look. Then I saw a company name, Airline Integrated Services. I took out my phone. The search results appeared immediately. Aviation support, maintenance operations, ground services, corporate headquarters in Irving, Texas, Dallas area. I lowered the phone. Denise had told me the successor to Thomas's old company was headquartered near Dallas. Melissa was flying to Dallas. And documents connecting Thomas's trust to that company were hidden inside my suitcase. That was no longer coincidence. I continued reading. One document was titled Authorized Representative Communication Form. My legal name appeared near the top, Vivian Elaine Cooper. Below it, Melissa Cooper Grant. The form appeared to authorize Melissa to communicate with the trust administrator and request information regarding holdings and administrative matters. I read every sentence twice. It did not appear to transfer ownership. It did not give her control over the trust, but it would allow her to speak on my behalf in ways I had never approved. The signature line at the bottom was blank. I exhaled. Then I turned the page. My relief disappeared. There were photocopies of old documents bearing my signature, a tax form, a property document, an acknowledgement from years earlier. Someone had enlarged the signature sections. Beside them were handwritten attempts. Vivian Cooper, Vivian E. Cooper, V. E. Cooper, again, again, again. My stomach turned. Some attempts were poor, others were disturbingly close. I knew Melissa's handwriting. These weren't casual notes. Someone had been practicing my signature. I felt as if I were looking at evidence belonging to strangers. This couldn't be my daughter. Melissa, who used to leave Mother's Day cards on my pillow. Melissa, who held my hand through Thomas's funeral. Melissa, who had spent hours helping me sort insurance paperwork after his death. Yet the handwriting was hers. I called her. 4 rings, voicemail. Melissa, call me. I hung up and immediately called again. Voicemail. This time I left a different message. I found the envelope in my suitcase. My voice sounded calmer than I felt. I found the trust papers, Melissa. And I found the copies of my signature. Call me now. I ended the call. 30 seconds passed, then a minute. My phone buzzed. For one hopeful second I thought she was calling. Instead it was a text. Please don't make this worse than it already is. I stared at the words. Worse, I typed. Make what worse? The typing indicator appeared. 3 dots. Then disappeared. Returned. Disappeared again. Nothing came. I typed, why are there copies of my signature? No response. I called again. Straight to voicemail. She had turned off her phone. Something changed inside me then. Until that moment, I had been behaving like a mother, waiting for her child to explain bad behavior. I had been searching for excuses Melissa could give me. Stress, fear, misunderstanding. But those papers demanded something different. Facts. I photographed every page, front and back. I photographed the envelope. Then I placed everything exactly as I had found it. 30 years in bookkeeping had taught me never to alter suspicious records before documenting them. I carried the envelope back to Denise. She looked at my face. You found something. I placed the Airline page on the counter. Is this the company? She read it. Yes. You're certain that's the successor company my father mentioned? I showed her only the heading, not the signature pages. Where did you get this my suitcase? Her eyebrows rose. You packed it, no? We looked at each other. My daughter did. Denise lowered her voice. Mrs. Cooper, do you have an attorney? Yes. I think I'd call them. I intend to. She nodded. I'll speak to my father too. Thank you. I ordered a taxi. During the ride home, I sat with the suitcase pressed against my knees. I kept remembering the night before. Did you ever find Dad's old trust paperwork? Do you have copies? And the repeated questions that morning. You brought your ID, right? Why had my identification mattered so much? Maybe the original plan required me to be present somewhere. Maybe Melissa intended to put a document in front of me and disguise what it meant. Or perhaps she only needed access to something while I was away. I refused to speculate further. Rebecca Sloan would tell me what the documents meant. When the taxi turned onto my street, I felt a wave of relief. My brick house stood exactly as I had left it. Thomas and I had bought it when Melissa was 9. He planted the maple tree near the driveway. I had chosen the white shutters. For 37 years, that house had represented safety. I paid the driver and carried my suitcase inside. The first thing I did was lock the door. Then I went directly to Thomas's study. The afternoon light fell across his desk. I reached into the small ceramic bowl on the bookshelf and took out the brass key to the lower drawer. I inserted it, turned. The drawer opened immediately. I froze. That drawer always stuck. You had to turn the key pull halfway, then lift slightly. Thomas used to joke that the desk had its own security system. Now it slid open smoothly. I leaned closer. There was a fresh scratch beside the lock. My pulse quickened. I pulled out the folder marked Cooper Family Trust. It felt thinner than it had the previous night. I sat down and emptied it onto the desk. Annual statements, tax documents, old correspondence, distribution notices. But several papers I remembered seeing were gone. One had been a thick amendment with Thomas's initials at the bottom. Another had contained a list of company holdings. I searched the drawer. Nothing. Then I noticed something else. A faint smear of pale foundation near the edge of the desk. Melissa wore foundation. I rarely did. I closed my eyes. She had been in this room. Perhaps that morning while I was upstairs checking my suitcase. Maybe while I was making coffee. Maybe when she told me she needed to use the bathroom. My daughter had brought me to the airport after someone had opened Thomas's locked desk and removed documents. I called Melissa. Voicemail. This time I left no message. I sat in Thomas's chair. On the corner of his desk was an old photograph of the three of us at Virginia Beach. Melissa was 13. Thomas had one arm around her and one around me. All three of us were laughing. I picked it up. "What happened to her, Tom?" I whispered. There was no answer, only the quiet house. I put the photograph down. Then I did something I should have done the moment I left the airport. I stopped trying to solve the problem as Melissa's mother. I started approaching it as Vivian Cooper, the woman who had spent almost 30 years tracing missing numbers. The woman Thomas trusted to recognize when something did not add up. I placed the envelope from my suitcase beside the incomplete trust file. Then I opened my contacts. Rebecca Sloan had handled our estate documents for nearly 15 years. My finger hovered over her name. Before I called, another message appeared. Melissa. For a second, hope rose in me. Then I read it. "Mom, please go home and wait for me. I can explain everything when I get back." I stared at those words. When I get back. From Dallas. I typed only one response. I am home. Then I pressed Rebecca's number. Because whatever Melissa believed she was going to fix before I discovered the truth, she had made one mistake. She had left the evidence in my suitcase. And now I was done waiting for my daughter to decide how much of my own life I was allowed to understand. The daughter I kept rescuing. Rebecca Sloan answered on the third ring. "Vivian. Is everything all right?" I looked at the papers covering Thomas's desk. "No," I said. "I don't believe it is." Rebecca had been our estate attorney for nearly 15 years. She had helped Thomas update our wills, organize beneficiary documents, and settle the legal details after his death. She was calm in the way good attorneys often are. Not cold, steady. "What happened?" "My daughter left me at the airport this morning." There was a pause. "Melissa." "Yes." I told her everything. The Charleston trip, the missing reservation, Melissa's secret ticket to Dallas, the connection Denise had mentioned between Dallas and the successor to Cooper Aviation. Then I told her about the envelope hidden in my suitcase. When I reached the copies of my signature, Rebecca interrupted. "Copies, yes. What kind? Old signatures enlarged from documents, and handwritten versions beside them. Attempts to reproduce your signature. That's what they look like." Rebecca became very quiet. Vivian listened carefully. "Do not sign anything Melissa sends you." "I won't. Do not verbally authorize her to speak for you. If anyone contacts you about the trust, tell them you need to speak with counsel before answering substantive questions." "All right. Photograph everything. I already did." That seemed to surprise her. "Good. I was a bookkeeping manager for almost 30 years, Rebecca. I remember. When numbers looked wrong, I learned not to rearrange the desk before making copies." She gave a small laugh, but the seriousness remained in her voice. "Can you come tomorrow morning?" "Yes. Bring the envelope and everything you can locate from Thomas's trust." I looked at the scratched lock. That may be another problem. I explained that someone appeared to have opened Thomas's desk. Several papers were missing. "Do you believe Melissa took them?" "I don't know." "Did anyone else have access to the house?" "No." "Then don't confront her about that yet." "Why?" "Because right now we need facts, not accusations. Facts." That word calmed me. After we ended the call, I remained in Thomas's chair. A framed photograph sat near the lamp. Melissa at 19, Long brown hair, college sweatshirt, bright smile. I picked it up. That was the daughter my mind still produced whenever I heard the word Melissa. Not the 42-year-old woman flying toward Dallas with secrets. My little girl. Perhaps that was why I had missed so much. Mothers have a dangerous ability to preserve old versions of their children. We remember scraped knees while everyone else sees adults making choices. Melissa had been easy to rescue, and I had rescued her often. The first time was after college. She graduated with student loans and a starting salary that barely covered rent. Thomas and I paid $12,000 toward the debt. Just enough to help her breathe, I said. Thomas agreed, but later that evening he told me something I remembered now. Helping once is kindness, Viv. Helping every time can become an expectation. I had rolled my eyes. She's our daughter. I know. She's not taking advantage of us. I didn't say she was. Then what are you saying? He kissed my forehead. Just make sure she learns the difference between having parents and having a safety net. At the time, I thought Thomas was being unnecessarily cautious. Years later, Melissa and Eric wanted to buy their first house. They were short on the down payment. I gave them $25,000. Not loaned. Gave. Melissa cried when I handed her the check. You're the best mother in the world. I remembered how good those words felt. Then Eric's construction business hit trouble. A client delayed payment. Payroll was due. Melissa called me crying. We only need $14,000 until the receivable clears. I transferred 16. They eventually returned 4. I never mentioned the remaining 12. Then came the roof repair. 5,000. A medical deductible. 3,000. New equipment for Eric's business. 8,000. None of those amounts threatened my financial security. That was how I justified it. I could afford to help, so why shouldn't I? But sitting at Thomas's desk, I realized I had always measured the cost in dollars. I had never measured what repeated rescue might be teaching Melissa. After Thomas died, her questions about my money became more direct. One Sunday afternoon, she stood beside me washing dishes. Mom, have you ever had this house appraised? No. You should. Why? Because Richmond prices have gone up. I know. You could be sitting on a lot of equity. I laughed. I'm not sitting on equity. I'm sitting in my house. She didn't laugh. Another time, Eric asked whether Thomas's trust allowed me to access principal. I don't know. He looked genuinely shocked. You never checked? No. How can you not know? Because Thomas arranged things so I receive what I need. But there might be significantly more available. I remember looking at him. Why would I need significantly more? Or, he changed the subject. 2 months earlier, Melissa had asked another question. Do you still get those little payments from Dad's aviation investment? Yes. How much? It varies. What are the underlying shares worth? I have no idea. You should find out. Why? She shrugged. Just responsible planning. Responsible planning. That phrase sounded different now. My phone rang. Eric. I stared at his name before answering. Hello, Vivian. His voice was tight. Where are you? At home? A pause. Melissa said you were traveling. I was told I was traveling. What happened? You tell me. I don't know what you mean. Do you know where your wife is? Another pause. That pause told me more than his words. Eric, she had some business to handle. In Dallas, silence. I stood. So you do know. I think you should discuss this with Melissa. I've tried. She turned off her phone. She'll call when she lands. What is she doing in Dallas? I don't know the details. His voice rose slightly. Eric had always done that when he lied. Did you know she told me we were going to Charleston, Vivian? Yes or no? I knew she wanted you out of the house for a few days. Every muscle in my body went still. What did you just say? I didn't mean it like that. How did you mean it? She thought you needed a break. Then why am I standing in Richmond while she flies to Dallas? He exhaled. This has gotten complicated. No, Eric. It has gotten clear. Please don't jump to conclusions. I looked toward Thomas's study. Did you or Melissa open Thomas's desk? What, the locked drawer? No. The answer came too quickly. Are you sure? Of course. Documents are missing. I don't know anything about that. Did you know there were copies of my signature in my suitcase? Nothing. Eric. You're misunderstanding what you found. That sentence chilled me. I hadn't told him exactly what I found, only that there were copies of my signature. How do you know I'm misunderstanding it? Silence. Eric. Just wait until Melissa gets back. From Dallas. She can explain. Why can't you? The line disconnected. He had hung up. I stared at the phone. Eric knew. Maybe not every detail, but he knew enough to be afraid of saying the wrong thing. I returned to Thomas's study. This time I stopped looking at the papers emotionally. I approached them the way I used to approach a set of accounts that refused to balance. I made an inventory. Every folder, every annual statement, every date, every distribution notice. I arranged them chronologically. After almost 2 hours, I found an annual trust statement from several years earlier. The numbers were unremarkable. Then one line caught my attention. Legacy Equity Interest, Cooper Aviation Successor Holdings. No valuation, just a small percentage. I stared at it. Why had Melissa suddenly become interested in that percentage? I turned the page. Attached was a distribution notice. Behind it was a yellow sticky note in Thomas's handwriting. Viv, keep original ownership records with Rebecca if anything happens to me. Copies at home only. For the first time that afternoon, relief moved through me. Of course, Thomas had always believed important originals should exist somewhere safer than our house. Whatever Melissa had removed from the desk, Rebecca might still possess the controlling documents. I photographed Thomas's note. Then my phone buzzed. A message from Rebecca. Vivian, I located Thomas's archived trust file. I sat straighter. Another message arrived. There is something here we need to discuss tomorrow. Please do not contact the trust administrator until we speak. My hands tightened around the phone. I typed, "Is something wrong?" Her answer came quickly. "I don't know yet, but I made a preliminary inquiry after our call." I waited. Then another message appeared. The trust administrator's records show 2 recent inquiries from someone claiming to be acting with your permission. I read the sentence 3 times. Someone had already made contact. This wasn't merely Melissa searching through old paperwork. Someone had approached the people responsible for Thomas's trust and used my authority to do it. I looked at the photograph of 19-year-old Melissa beside Thomas's lamp. For years, whenever my daughter got into trouble, I had asked the same question. How can I help her? But sitting there surrounded by missing documents and copied signatures, another question finally replaced it. What if helping her was exactly how we had reached this point? I turned the photograph face down. Not because I stopped loving my daughter, because I needed for one night to stop looking at the girl she had been. Tomorrow, Rebecca and I would find out what the woman she had become had done. And for the first time in Melissa's life, I wasn't going to rescue her before I knew the truth. The number they never told me. I arrived at Rebecca Sloane's office at 8:40 the next morning, carrying Thomas's old document box against my chest. I had barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Melissa standing beside me at the airport. "I love you, Mom." Then I saw her SUV disappearing into traffic. By 3 in the morning, I had stopped trying to understand how those two things could exist together. Love and betrayal. Perhaps they always could. Rebecca's office occupied the second floor of an old brick building near downtown Richmond. Thomas used to joke that lawyers chose buildings with heavy doors because they wanted clients to feel guilty before they even received the bill. The receptionist led me into Rebecca's conference room. Rebecca was already there. She was 61, silver-haired, practical, and almost impossible to rattle. That morning, however, she looked concerned. On the table sat a thick file. Cooper Family Trust. You found the originals, most of them. I placed my box beside hers. Rebecca gestured toward the chair. Before we start, I want you to understand something. All right. I don't yet know that anyone has successfully transferred, pledged, or taken anything from this trust. I nodded. That's important because I don't want fear filling gaps where facts should be. You sound like Thomas. I'll take that as a compliment. It was. I handed her the envelope from my suitcase. Rebecca put on her reading glasses. She examined the representative form first, then the signature pages. Her expression tightened. Did you make any of these handwritten signatures? No. Did you give Melissa permission to practice your signature? Certainly not. Did you authorize her to contact the trust administrator? No. Did you authorize Eric? No. She set the pages down. Then we proceed carefully. What exactly does this form do, less than it might appear to? That surprised me. It would permit an authorized representative to communicate with the administrator and obtain certain information. It does not by itself transfer ownership. So Melissa couldn't take the shares with this, not with this document alone. Relief came, but only briefly. Then why would she want it? Information can be valuable. Rebecca opened her archived file. Especially if someone recently discovered that an old asset may be worth considerably more than anyone expected. There was something deliberate in the way she said that. How much more she didn't answer immediately. Instead, she pulled out several documents. Let's start with what you believed. All right. What did Thomas tell you about Cooper Aviation when he sold his interest that he was done running it? Anything about retained ownership? He said there were some investments left over. I never paid much attention. You received distributions, yes, usually small enough that I treated them as investment income. Did Thomas ever explain where they came from? Probably. But Thomas could explain aviation finance for 20 minutes and make me wish I'd asked about the weather. Rebecca smiled. Then she turned serious again. Thomas sold his operating control. He did not sell every economic interest connected to the company. I frowned. What does that mean? Part of the transaction allowed him to retain a small legacy equity position in Cooper Aviation initially. But corporate ownership changed over time. She showed me a diagram. Cooper Aviation Services had been purchased by a regional aviation company. That company later merged with another. Assets were reorganized. The surviving business eventually became part of Airline Integrated Services, the same company whose name I had found in my suitcase. So Thomas still owned part of Aerodyne, not directly in the simple sense. The trust retained an equity interest that evolved through those transactions. How much? Rebecca slid an old statement toward me. The percentage looked tiny. I almost laughed. Yes, that's what this is about. Possibly. Rebecca, that's barely anything, in percentage terms. She opened another document. But percentages are meaningless without knowing the value of the company underneath them. I looked at her. She folded her hands. Aerodyne has expanded substantially over the last decade. How substantially? Vary. Something tightened in my chest. Yesterday after you called, I reviewed recent correspondence in the file. The trust administrator received a notice related to a possible acquisition transaction involving Aerodyne. Acquisition. A larger corporation is negotiating to purchase or recapitalize significant portions of the company. And Thomas's old interest could become payable or converted as part of that transaction. I stared at the papers. How much? I cannot give you a final number because there is no completed transaction. Rebecca. She knew me well enough to stop cushioning it. Based on preliminary figures referenced in the correspondence, the trust's legacy interest could potentially be worth several $1,000,000. I said nothing. The room seemed suddenly too quiet. Several, yes. 2, potentially more. 3, Vivian. The figures are preliminary. How much? She exhaled. One internal estimate suggests somewhere between $4 and $6 million, depending on transaction terms, taxes, conversion rights, and final valuation. I stared at her. $4 to $6 million. I thought about every small distribution check I had deposited without curiosity. I thought about Thomas reading those thick annual packets in his study. Did Thomas know he knew the interest had potential? He could not have known what the company would become. Why didn't he tell me he may have? I almost objected. Then I remembered Thomas once saying, those old aviation shares might surprise you someday. I had been making dinner. I'd replied, if they surprise me enough to pay for a cruise, let me know. He laughed. Then life continued. What does Melissa know? I asked. That is what concerns me. Rebecca opened another folder. The administrator keeps records of material inquiries. She turned a page toward me. There were 2 recent contacts. The first had occurred 11 days earlier. The second 3 days ago. Who called? The notes do not identify the caller conclusively. The person represented herself as your daughter and said she was assisting you with financial organization. My mouth went dry. Melissa. That seems likely. What did she ask Rebecca read from the record? First call requested current valuation information regarding Legacy Aviation Holdings. Exactly the question Melissa had asked me. What are the underlying shares worth? And the second, Rebecca hesitated. She asked what documentation would be required for an authorized representative to communicate regarding the trust. I looked toward the envelope. The form, most likely. Did the administrator send it to her? They apparently sent a blank form to an email address provided during the call. Without speaking to me, they did not give her control. They provided a standard administrative form, but she said she had my permission. Yes. I felt heat rising into my face. Did they tell her the value? Not formally, but they may have confirmed that a corporate transaction was pending. That was enough. Melissa had learned there could be millions involved. Then she had started asking about my identification, my signature, my trust documents. Could she have transferred anything? No evidence suggests she did. Could she sell the shares? No. Could she borrow against them? Not simply by using this form. I exhaled. Then what was she doing in Dallas? That remains the question. I stood and walked toward the window. Below us, people moved along the sidewalk. For years, I had assumed the greatest financial risk in my family was Eric's struggling construction business. Now I wondered whether the real risk was desperation. How much debt do Melissa and Eric have? Rebecca looked surprised. I don't know. They've borrowed money from me several times. That doesn't necessarily mean I know. I turned around. But something changed. 11 days ago, Melissa learned about the potential value. 3 days ago, she asked how to become my representative. Then came Charleston. Then Dallas. Those weren't random events. They were steps. Rebecca closed the file. I agree that the timing is concerning. What do we do? First, I'll notify the administrator in writing that no one currently has authority to act for you unless I confirm it directly. Do it. Second, I recommend changing access credentials on any financial accounts Melissa has helped you manage. Done today. Third, we preserve these documents. I looked at the copied signatures. And Melissa, don't threaten her. I wasn't planning to. Don't accuse her of crimes. We don't yet know what she intended or whether she crossed that line. I understand. Rebecca studied me. You're very calm. No, I'm not. You appear calm. There's a difference. I sat down again. I keep thinking about the airport. What about it? If Melissa needed me to sign something, why leave me there? Rebecca didn't answer. That bothers me more than everything else. Why? Because something must have changed. Maybe the original plan had been Charleston. Maybe Dallas had become necessary at the last minute. Maybe Melissa had discovered she could accomplish something without me. Or maybe someone in Dallas had requested proof she didn't have. Rebecca tapped the representative form. There's another possibility. What perhaps the plan was never to obtain your signature at the airport. I looked at her. Perhaps the goal was simply to get you away from Richmond long enough for something else to happen. A chill passed through me. My house. Possibly. The desk. Possibly. I thought about the fresh scratch near the lock. Then Rebecca's phone rang. She glanced at the screen. Trust Administrator, she answered. This is Rebecca Sloan. I watched her face as she listened. Yes. She's sitting with me now. Another pause. No, she did not authorize that. My stomach tightened. Rebecca reached for a pen. When she wrote something down. Dallas. I stood. Rebecca's eyes met mine. Yes, she said into the phone. Send me the details immediately. She ended the call. What happened? The administrator received another inquiry this morning. From Melissa. They can't verify that yet. What did the person ask? Rebecca turned the notepad toward herself. They asked whether a beneficiary's expected future interest could be acknowledged in connection with private financing. I stared at her. Say that in English. Someone wants to know whether money. Melissa may inherit someday, can be treated as part of a financial arrangement today. My hands went cold. Can it? Not the way they seem to hope. But why would Melissa need that? Rebecca didn't answer. She didn't have to. Eric's business. The second mortgage Melissa had once mentioned. All the time she had called me because another bill had become an emergency. I looked at the old trust statement. $4 to $6 million. Yesterday that number had meant nothing to me because I didn't know it existed. To someone drowning in debt, it could look like salvation. And suddenly I understood why Melissa's questions had changed. She hadn't simply discovered an old investment, she had discovered a future. And somewhere along the way, she had apparently started making plans for that future before I was finished living mine. My daughter finally called. Melissa called at 6:43 that evening. I know because I had been watching the clock. Not intentionally. At least that was what I told myself. I was sitting at my kitchen table with a bowl of soup I had reheated twice and barely touched when her name appeared on my phone. Melissa. For 1 second, every emotion I had felt during the previous 36 hours disappeared beneath a mother's instinct. Relief. My daughter was calling. Then I remembered the airport, the envelope, the copied signatures. Dallas. I answered. Hello. Mom. Her voice cracked. I closed my eyes. Yes. Oh, thank God. I almost laughed. You knew exactly where I was. I've been trying to figure out what to say. You could start with why you left me at an airport. Silence. Then I heard her breathing change. Mom, I'm sorry. I waited. I know that doesn't fix anything. No. I panicked. About what? Another pause. I knew you were starting to suspect something. There it was. Not confusion. Not an emergency. Something. What was I starting to suspect? You kept asking questions in the car. I asked what airline we were flying. I know. And where our hotel was. I know. And why you cared about your father's trust. I know, Mom. Her voice rose. Please stop repeating everything like I don't know what happened. I felt anger flare. You left me beside a suitcase and drove away. I know. Then don't tell me how to speak about it. Silence. When Melissa spoke again, she was crying. I'm sorry. For years, her tears had been one of the fastest ways to make me surrender. When she was 12 and failed a math test, she cried. I helped her study until midnight. When she was 26 and couldn't pay rent, she cried. I wrote a check. When Eric's business struggled, she cried. I transferred money. Her pain had always activated something in me. Fix it. But I had spent the previous night thinking about how often fixing things had prevented Melissa from facing them. So I let her cry. Finally, she whispered, Are you still there? Yes. Can we just start over? No. The word surprised both of us. Mom, you can explain. I'm trying. Then explain, Dallas. The crying stopped. Not gradually. Immediately. I noticed. What do you mean I know where you are? How does it matter? Yes. No, Melissa. What matters is why you told me we were going to Charleston when you bought yourself a ticket to Dallas. I can explain that. I'm listening. I had to meet someone who some people connected to Dad's old company. There was no point pretending anymore. Aerodyne silence. How do you know that name? I found the documents you put in my suitcase. Oh, God. And the copies of my signature. Mom, those are not what you think. What do I think? I wasn't forging anything. I didn't use that word. But that's what you're implying. I asked what they were. Melissa exhaled sharply. I needed to know how your signature appeared on the old forms. So you practiced it? No. I saw your handwriting. I was comparing signatures. For what? Because the administrator said the authorization had to match identification records. I stood slowly. Why were you preparing an authorization form at all to help you? Stop saying that. What? Stop calling everything help. She went quiet. I walked to the window. The backyard was dark except for the small light Thomas had installed beside the shed. You contacted the trust administrator twice. Melissa said nothing. Rebecca confirmed it. You called Rebecca? Yes. Mom, why would you involve an attorney? I almost couldn't believe the question. Because someone contacted a trust in my name. I told them I was your daughter. You told them you had my permission. I was gathering information. Information about several $1,000,000. The silence that followed was different. Heavy. So she knew. How long have you known? I asked. A few weeks. And you didn't tell me. I was going to. When I understood what was happening. It belongs to my trust, Melissa. I know. Then why did you need to understand it before I did? Because you never cared about that paperwork. Her voice suddenly hardened. You had those documents sitting in Dad's desk for years. You didn't even know what the shares were worth. That makes them yours. I didn't say that. It sounds very close. Mom, please. I heard movement on her end. A hotel room, perhaps. A door closing. Then her voice dropped. Eric and I have problems. What kind? Financial? I closed my eyes. Of course. How bad I don't want to discuss that over the phone. You were willing to discuss my inheritance with strangers. It isn't your inheritance. My trust. You know what I mean. No. I'm beginning to realize I don't. Melissa started crying again. This time I heard exhaustion beneath it. Eric's business has been struggling. I know. No, you don't. How much trouble? A lot. I waited. She didn't give me a number. Is that why you're in Dallas? Partly. What's the other part? I needed to talk to people before something happened. What the Airline deal? What about it? I found out there was going to be an acquisition. How some old correspondence came to your house. My chest tightened. You opened my mail. It wasn't marked private. It was addressed to me. I handled paperwork for you all the time. There it was again. The blurred boundary I had allowed. You helped me with paperwork, I said. That did not make it yours. I know. Do you? She began speaking quickly. The letter mentioned a possible liquidity event involving the legacy shares. I didn't understand it, so I looked up Airline. Then I found Dad's old documents. I realized the shares could be worth millions, and instead of telling me I was scared of what, that you would shut me out before I could fix things. The words landed strangely. Fix what? Our situation. There it was. Not my situation. Ours. I pulled out a chair and sat. How were my shares supposed to fix your situation? I wasn't going to take them. Then what? I needed proof that there was future family wealth. My stomach tightened. For whom, Mom? For whom, Melissa? A financial group. In Dallas, yes. What financial group? They work with private business restructuring. And what did you tell them? Nothing false. I remembered Rebecca's call. Someone had asked whether a beneficiary's future interest could be acknowledged in connection with private financing. Did you tell them you were inheriting my trust? I am a beneficiary. That wasn't my question. I said there was a family trust. Did you tell them how much? I gave them an estimate. I gripped the edge of the table. An estimate of money you do not own. I know that. Apparently you don't. I was trying to prevent Eric from losing everything. Her voice broke. For the first time I heard something beyond manipulation. Fear. Real fear. But fear did not make the choices disappear. How does leaving me at the airport help Eric? It wasn't supposed to happen that way. Then tell me how it was supposed to happen. Silence. Melissa. The Charleston trip was real at first. No ticket existed in my name. I hadn't bought yours yet. You told me you had my boarding pass. I know. So you lied. Yes. The simplicity of the admission hurt. Why? Because I thought I needed you with me. With you where? She hesitated. Dallas. I stood. You were going to take me to Dallas. I thought if you met the advisors and understood what was happening, you might agree to help. Then why Charleston? Because if I told you it was about money, you wouldn't come. I almost laughed. You invented a mother-daughter vacation to get me to a financial meeting. I didn't know what else to do. And then, the meeting changed. What changed? They told me yesterday that your presence wasn't necessary for the preliminary discussion. So she bought herself a ticket. Late the previous night. The pieces aligned. Then why bring me to the airport at all? I didn't know how to tell you. That doesn't answer the question. I thought I could still put you on a flight to Charleston. Alone. Yes. I closed my eyes. There was the plan. Leave me safely occupied for 4 days while she went to Dallas. Then you panicked. Yes. Because I asked too many questions. Yes. And you drove away. Melissa began sobbing. I'm sorry. I believed she was sorry. But I was beginning to understand that regret after being discovered was not the same as honesty before discovery. What are you doing in Dallas right now? I have another meeting tomorrow. With whom? The advisors and someone connected to the Airline transaction. My pulse quickened. About my trust, about options. You have no authority to discuss options for my trust. I know that now. Rebecca has notified the administrator. What you cannot act for me. Mom, why would you do that because you don't act for me? Her breathing became shallow. You're going to ruin this. That sentence extinguished the last of my sympathy. No, Melissa, you don't understand what's at stake. Then tell me. We could lose the house. I said nothing. Eric could lose the company. Still nothing. People work for him, Mom. Families depend on those jobs. And your solution was my money. I was trying to find a bridge. Using an inheritance you haven't received. It would only be temporary. Melissa. What I am still alive. Silence. I had never said those words to my daughter before. I hated that I needed to. Finally, she whispered, I know. Do you? Yes. Because for the last few weeks you have been behaving as though my death is merely the date when your finances improve. That is horrible. So was leaving me at an airport. She cried harder. I let the silence remain between us. Then I asked one final question. Does Eric know everything? A long pause. He knows enough. That matched what I had already discovered. I need you to cancel tomorrow's meeting. I can't. You can. Mom, please. No, I have to fix this. No, Melissa, you have to stop. Her voice became small. What am I supposed to do? For most of her life, that question would have sent me reaching for my checkbook. This time I answered differently. I don't know. She went silent. But whatever happens next, I continued, it cannot begin with pretending something I own already belongs to you. Mom, I have to go. Please don't hang up. I love you, Melissa. She started crying again. I love you too. I believe you. And strangely, I did. That was what made everything so painful. But love doesn't give you permission to manage my life without me. I ended the call. For several minutes, I sat at the kitchen table in silence. Then I called Rebecca. She answered almost immediately. I spoke to Melissa, I said. What did she tell you? She has another meeting tomorrow in Dallas. With the financial group, and someone connected to Airline. Rebecca became quiet. What do you want to do? I looked toward the dark window. For 68 years I had believed confrontation meant shouting accusations slammed doors. Thomas had taught me something different. When something mattered, you went to the source. First I said I want to know exactly how much debt my daughter and her husband are hiding. And after that I thought of Melissa's words. We could lose the house. Eric could lose the company. I felt sorrow. But beneath the sorrow, something stronger was forming. Clarity. After that, I said, I want to know exactly what she promised those people in Dallas. Because my daughter had finally told me why she went there. But I had the terrible feeling she still hadn't told me how deep the problem really was. The debt behind the lies. The next morning I woke before sunrise. For several minutes I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to the quiet house. Thomas used to wake early. He would make coffee before the sun came up, then sit in the kitchen reading the newspaper, with his glasses low on his nose. After he died, I hated mornings. They were when the absence became most obvious. But that morning felt different. I wasn't waking up wondering how to protect Melissa from the consequences of her choices. I was waking up determined to understand those consequences. At 8:15 I met Rebecca at her office. She had already prepared a folder. I spoke with the trust administrator, she said, and no unauthorized transfer has occurred. I exhaled. That's good. It is. But, she looked at me. But the administrator received enough information from someone claiming to represent you that they flagged the account for additional review. Can Melissa still access anything? No. Can she request information not without authorization? I nodded. For the first time in days, I felt something resembling safety. Then Rebecca opened another folder. This is about Eric. I frowned. You found something only what we can verify through legitimate records. She slid several pages toward me. Mortgage statements, business filings, public lines. I stared at the numbers. There were more debts than I had imagined. Eric's construction company had taken out equipment financing, then a line of credit, then another loan tied to a commercial property. There was also a second mortgage on their home. How much Rebecca calculated carefully. Personally and through the business, the obligations appear to be substantial. Give me the number. She did. I felt my stomach drop. I had known they were struggling. I hadn't understood they were drowning. Why didn't they tell me? Perhaps they were embarrassed. Melissa has never been embarrassed to ask me for money. Rebecca gave me a sympathetic look. That may be part of the problem. I looked at the papers again. The more I read, the more the previous months began making sense. Melissa asking about my house. Eric asking about principal distributions. Questions about Thomas's trust. Questions about the value of the aviation shares. They weren't curious. They were calculating. How did they expect to solve this, I asked. Rebecca turned to another document. This is where things become concerning. She showed me a summary of a private financing discussion. The names had been partially redacted because the document had not been formally provided to them. But enough remained. There was a reference to anticipated family assets, future trust distribution, potential beneficiary liquidity. I felt cold. They told lenders I would give Melissa money. Not exactly. What did they say? They represented that substantial family assets were expected to become available. Expected when Rebecca looked at me. After your death. The room became very still. I stared at her. So they used my future inheritance as collateral. Not legally as collateral, but they used the expectation of it as evidence of financial strength. I remembered Thomas's words. Make sure she learns the difference between having parents and having a safety net. He had understood something I hadn't. An inheritance can become dangerous long before money changes hands. It can become an expectation, a promise, a number someone starts spending in their imagination. Can they do that? They can say almost anything in a conversation. The important question is whether anyone relied on those representations in a binding financial agreement. And did they? We're still determining that. I looked out the window. What happens if they did? They could face serious financial consequences. But we need facts before drawing conclusions. I nodded. That was the hardest lesson I had learned in 48 hours. Facts first, emotions second. I pulled out my phone. Melissa told me Eric's company employs people. Yes, she used that to justify what she was doing, probably. I thought about those employees, people who had nothing to do with my family, people who might lose jobs because two adults had built a financial plan around money that didn't belong to them. I didn't want Eric's employees to suffer. But I also knew something. Their wages could not become my obligation simply because I loved my daughter. I want to know exactly what they owe, I said. Rebecca nodded. We can help you understand the public records and documents you already have access to. But we are not going to investigate them improperly. I don't want anything improper. Good. She handed me another sheet. There's one more thing. I looked at it. What Eric's business has been trying to refinance for several months. Before Melissa found out about the trust, yes. How long? About 6 months. That changed something. So the trust wasn't the original problem. No, it was the potential solution. Exactly. I leaned back. That distinction mattered. Melissa hadn't discovered a crisis because of the trust. She had discovered a possible escape from a crisis that already existed. And once she saw millions of dollars connected to her future, she stopped seeing it as something distant. She saw it as the answer. My phone buzzed. A message from Melissa. Mom, please don't do anything until I get home. I showed Rebecca. She read it. Are you going to answer no? Good. I put the phone away. But then another thought struck me. Rebecca, why did she leave me at the airport? We discussed that yesterday. No. I shook my head. Yesterday we discussed why she went to Dallas. I'm asking why she needed me physically at the airport. Rebecca considered it. You believe there was another purpose, yes. Why? Because if she only needed to get away from me, she could have told me the trip was cancelled. True, she didn't. What are you thinking? I looked down at the trust papers. She wanted me packed. Rebecca's eyes narrowed. She wanted me carrying identification. I continued. She wanted me to believe I had a boarding pass. Go on. She put the trust documents in my suitcase. Rebecca slowly leaned forward. You think she wanted you to travel with them? I think she wanted something else. What I don't know yet. That was the part that frightened me. There were still missing pieces. Rebecca picked up her phone. Let's check one thing. She called the trust administrator. After several minutes, she ended the call. Well, the administrator confirms that the blank authorization form was sent to an email address Melissa provided. My number Melissa's. I frowned. Then how would I have signed it? We don't know. The copied signatures, the practice handwriting, the form in my suitcase, the airport. Something didn't fit. Then I remembered something Melissa had said the night before. The meeting changed. They told me your presence wasn't necessary. I looked at Rebecca. What if the original plan required me for what I don't know? She waited. I thought about the documents. Maybe they wanted me to sign something in person. Possible. And when the meeting changed, Melissa no longer needed me. Also possible. Then she left me at the airport. Rebecca nodded slowly. We need to know what was discussed in Dallas. Yes. Without contacting them directly. Yes. Then we wait for whatever legitimate documents or correspondence become available. I hated waiting. But I agreed. That afternoon I returned home. For the first time since Thomas died, I went through his desk, not as a widow sorting memories, but as someone searching for a pattern. I opened every folder. Business, tax, trust, insurance, corporate. I found old letters from Cooper Aviation employees, photographs, invoices, a newspaper clipping from the year Thomas sold his company. The headline read, Local aviation firm joins regional expansion. Thomas had circled one paragraph. I read it. He had retained a minority economic interest after the sale. I stared at the date. The investment had survived 3 corporate reorganizations. I understood why he had stopped talking about it. The checks had been modest, but he had known it existed. Then I found something tucked inside a folder marked Tax Returns, a handwritten note. Not from Thomas, from Melissa. The note was dated 2 months earlier. I recognized her handwriting immediately. Mom, need to talk about Dad's aviation shares. Call me. No explanation, no signature. I sat down. 2 months earlier. That meant Melissa had begun investigating the shares long before the recent trip. I pulled out my phone and photographed the note. Then I noticed something else. There was a second note underneath. This one was written by Eric. Ask if trust can advance beneficiary funds. My heart sank. The handwriting was unmistakable. I sat there staring at those 2 sentences. Melissa had not suddenly panicked because Eric's business collapsed. They had been planning, maybe quietly, maybe desperately, but planning. I finally understood why the airport betrayal hurt so much. It wasn't one bad decision. It was months of decisions I had never been allowed to see. That evening, Melissa called again. I almost didn't answer. Then I did. Mom. Yes. I need you to listen. I am. I made mistakes. Yes. I thought I could fix everything. With my money. With the trust. That is my money. I know. Do you? Yes. She was crying. I didn't steal anything. I know. I never took $1. I know. Then please don't treat me like a criminal. I closed my eyes. I am treating you like an adult. Silence. What does that mean? It means you don't get rescued simply because you made a bad choice. She began crying again. Mom, we're going to lose everything. I looked toward Thomas's photograph. For years, I had believed losing everything meant losing money. Now I knew better. Sometimes you lose something much more important when you build your life around money you haven't earned. You may lose things, I said quietly. But that doesn't mean I have to lose myself saving you. Melissa didn't answer. I heard her breathing. Then she whispered, I wish Dad were here. So do I. I think he would understand. I almost smiled sadly. No, Melissa. What? Your father would understand why you were afraid. I paused, but he would still expect you to face what you did. The line went quiet, and I knew the hardest part was still ahead. Because Melissa had not stolen the money. Because Melissa had not stolen the money, she had not forged my signature successfully. She had not transferred the shares. Yet. But she had already built a financial plan around a future that belonged to me. And in doing so, she had crossed a line I could no longer pretend not to see. The next morning she would meet the people in Dallas again. This time I would not be waiting at an airport. I would be waiting for the truth. The man who remembered Thomas. The next morning I woke before my alarm. For the first time in several days I didn't reach for my phone immediately. I knew there would probably be another message from Melissa. Maybe another apology. Maybe another request. Maybe another warning that I was making things worse. Instead, I walked downstairs and made coffee. The house was quiet. Thomas's chair was still beside the window. His photograph was still on the desk. I stood there holding my coffee and wondered what he would have done if he had been alive. The answer came almost immediately. He would have asked questions. Lots of them. Then he would have listened. That was something Thomas had always been good at. He rarely reacted to the first version of a story. He wanted the details underneath it, so I decided to do the same. At 9:15, Denise Walker called. I had almost forgotten about the conversation we'd had at the airport. Mrs. Cooper, Denise. I talked to my father. My heart lifted. What did he say? He remembered your husband immediately. I sat at the kitchen table. Tell me everything. Denise laughed softly. I tried. He talked for almost 2 hours. That sounds like Sam. He said Mr. Cooper was one of the few owners who knew every employee by name. That sounds like Thomas too. He also remembered you. I smiled. He remembered me. He said you were the woman who kept the books and somehow knew when a vendor was overcharging before anyone else noticed. I laughed. I did catch a few more than a few. We both laughed. For a moment the last few days felt far away. Then Denise became serious. My father remembers something important about the company. What? Your husband never considered the sale of Cooper Aviation a simple sale. I frowned. What did he mean? He said Mr. Cooper was worried about what would happen to the employees after the acquisition. That sounded exactly like Thomas. Did he tell you why he said the purchasing company wanted to restructure operations? There were discussions about reducing staff and moving certain functions. I remembered those years. Thomas had come home exhausted. He had stopped talking about money and started talking about people. If they move the maintenance operation, he had once said, some families will have to move too. I hadn't understood how much that bothered him. He fought the deal I asked. According to Dad, he negotiated hard. Did he win partly? I smiled. That sounds like my husband. Denise continued. He accepted the sale eventually, but he retained a small economic interest. I looked toward Thomas's desk. The shares. Yes. Why, my father said Mr. Cooper didn't trust the purchasing company completely. That surprised me. Thomas trusted very few people completely, but when he did, he trusted them deeply. What did he tell your father? Denise hesitated. He said something about protecting the future. My chest tightened. Whose future, I don't know. I looked at the trust documents. Did he mention me? Yes. I sat straighter. What did he say? Denise took a breath. My father remembers your husband telling him that whatever happened to the company, he wanted something set aside that could not be easily reached by anyone else. I stared at the wall. Why would he say that he was worried about sudden wealth? I almost smiled. That sounds like Thomas. He apparently told my father that money changes people. It did. I looked down at my hands. Did he say anything about Melissa number nothing? Not specifically. That was a relief. Or perhaps it should have been. Was there a trust? Denise said yes. My father remembers lawyers setting something up after the sale. He didn't know the details. Did Thomas ever talk to him about it once, when years later? What did he say? He told my father that his wife would always be protected first. My throat tightened. Me, yes. I looked toward the photograph on the desk. Thomas, my husband, the man who had spent his life making sure everyone else was secure. Even after he was gone, he had apparently still been thinking about me. Denise, I said quietly, why would he need to protect me from my own family? I don't think he was protecting you from family specifically. Then what my father said, Mr. Cooper wanted the asset protected from anyone who might pressure the family. Anyone. Not Melissa. Not Eric. Anyone. I thought about the copied signatures, the representative form, the questions about the trust. Maybe Thomas had understood something about money that I had never fully appreciated. He knew that once people believed an asset belonged to them, they could become desperate enough to reach for it. Can I speak with your father? Absolutely. An hour later, Samuel Walker joined us by video call. He appeared on my laptop screen wearing a blue work shirt, despite being retired for more than a decade. The first thing he said was, "You're Vivian." I smiled. "And you're Sam." He laughed. "Thomas told me you had a better memory than all of us." He exaggerated. He never exaggerated about you. That made my eyes sting. We talked for several minutes about Thomas. Not the business, not the trust. Thomas. His terrible golf swing, his habit of leaving his coffee mug in the garage, the way he would get excited about a new piece of equipment and explain it to anyone trapped nearby. Then Samuel grew serious. "Vivian, I don't know what has happened recently. I don't expect you to. But Denise told me about your daughter." I nodded. "Thomas would have hated seeing you hurt." "I know. He loved that girl. I know that too." Samuel sighed. "He loved her enough to worry about her." I looked at him. "What do you mean your husband knew Melissa was smart, ambitious, but he also knew she believed money solved problems?" I felt something tighten in my chest. "Did he ever say that to you, not directly?" "Then how do you know?" "Because Thomas once told me something I never forgot." What Samuel leaned closer to the camera. He said, "Sam, if anything happens to me, make sure Vivian understands that the money is not the gift. The protection is the gift." I couldn't speak. The room blurred. "What did he mean?" I asked him. "What did he say?" "He said the trust was designed so Vivian could live her life without anyone convincing her to give away what she needed." I covered my mouth. For 6 years I had thought Thomas left me money. He had left me protection, and I had never understood it. Samuel continued. He was worried that people could pressure her. People, family, business partners, anybody who believed they had a right to something because they were close to her. I closed my eyes. That sentence could have been written for the woman sitting in my kitchen. Did he know the shares might become valuable? He hoped they would. Hoped, he said, the company had potential. How much potential? Samuel smiled faintly. Thomas never talked numbers with me. Why not? He said you were the numbers person. I laughed through tears. That sounds like him. Samuel nodded. Then he said something that made my heart stop. He also said the trust had a clause. What clause? I don't know the exact language. What kind? Something that prevented future beneficiaries from using their expected inheritance as leverage. I stared at him. Are you sure that's what he told me? I thought of the trust, the representative form, the financing discussions, the future inheritance. Everything suddenly seemed connected. Did Thomas ever mention a successor trustee? Yes. Who I don't remember the name. That's okay. Samuel looked at me carefully. Vivian did. Someone try to get you to sign something? I hesitated. Yes. Did you know? Good. He said the word firmly. Thomas would have wanted you to say no. I nodded. The conversation lasted another 20 minutes. Samuel remembered one more detail. After the sale of Cooper Aviation, Thomas had received a substantial payment, but he deliberately kept a small portion of the economic interest in trust, rather than placing it directly in Melissa's inheritance. At the time, Samuel said Thomas explained that the money was intended to grow quietly, not to become a prize, not to become a bargaining chip, not to become a rescue fund, a cushion for Vivian, a legacy for the family only after her lifetime. When the call ended, I sat in silence. I felt grief, But it wasn't the helpless grief I'd experienced after Thomas died. This grief was different. It carried gratitude. My husband had thought ahead. He had protected me in ways I hadn't understood. I called Rebecca. She answered quickly. I spoke with Samuel Walker. Good. He remembers Thomas discussing the trust. Rebecca became attentive. He said Thomas specifically wanted to prevent future beneficiaries from using expected inheritance as leverage. There was a pause. That's consistent with the documents. You knew I suspected it from the clause. Why didn't you tell me? Because I didn't want to alarm you before we knew whether anyone was attempting to use the provision. I looked at the papers. Well, now we know. Yes, Rebecca, I want to see the exact clause. You will. When today? She sounded serious. There is something else you should know. What the trust doesn't simply protect the assets. I waited. It may also give the trustee authority to intervene if a beneficiary attempts to pledge or assign an expected interest. I felt my heartbeat quicken. What does that mean for Melissa? It means if she has represented your future trust interest as available for financing the trust, may contain mechanisms to prevent that from becoming a binding claim, so her actions could hurt her own future position. Potentially. I sat back. That was the twist I hadn't expected. Melissa had believed she was reaching toward her inheritance. She may have been reaching toward the very provision designed to protect it. Rebecca. Yes, I don't want to destroy her. I know. I want her to understand what she did. That may take time. I know. And Vivian. Yes. Don't let guilt make you undo the protections Thomas created. I looked at his photograph. For 6 years I had thought keeping everything for myself would somehow dishonor him. Now I realized the opposite was true. He had built those protections because he wanted me to live without fear. The money wasn't the gift. The protection was the gift. I finally understood. That afternoon I opened Thomas's old desk and found the trust folder again. This time I wasn't searching for answers. I was ready to read them. Somewhere inside those pages was the clause my husband had left behind. And I had a feeling that once Rebecca explained it, everything Melissa had done in Dallas would look very different. Because my daughter thought she had discovered a fortune waiting for her. She hadn't realized her father had spent years making sure nobody could reach it before I was ready. The clause my husband left behind. Rebecca had the trust documents waiting for me when I arrived at her office the following morning. She had placed the original agreement in a protective folder on the conference table. I sat across from her, my hands folded tightly in my lap. For 6 years I had avoided reading most of the legal language surrounding Thomas's estate. Not because I didn't care. Because after he died, every page felt like another reminder that he was gone. I had trusted Rebecca. I had trusted Thomas. And I had trusted myself to live quietly with what remained. But now I needed to understand exactly what my husband had left behind. Rebecca opened the document. Before we get into the clause, she said, I want to explain the basic structure again. I nodded. The Cooper Family Trust owns the legacy aviation interest. Yes. You receive the benefits during your lifetime according to the trust terms. Yes. Melissa is a future beneficiary, meaning she receives something after me. Potentially, yes. Subject to the trust provisions. I looked at her. So it isn't hers now. No. Even though she's the beneficiary, no. I let out a breath. That distinction seemed obvious once spoken aloud, yet it was exactly the distinction Melissa had been ignoring. Rebecca continued. A beneficiary has an interest in what the trust may eventually distribute. That doesn't mean the beneficiary owns the trust property today, and Melissa knew that she should have. She didn't, or she chose not to accept it. Rebecca turned a page. This is the provision Thomas added during the final amendment. I looked down. The language was dense. Legal phrases filled paragraph after paragraph. I recognized words like beneficiary assignment transfer pledge, interest trustee, and future distribution. But one sentence stood out. A beneficiary's anticipated interest may not be pledged, assigned, transferred, or used as security for any personal obligation before distribution. I read it again. Then again. So she can't promise it to a lender, correct? She can't borrow against it. Not directly. She can't use it as collateral. Correct. And she can't tell someone it is available to pay her debts. She can tell them anything Rebecca said, but she cannot make the trust legally responsible for those statements. I leaned back. For the first time since the airport, I felt something inside me settle. Thomas had seen this possibility years before I ever imagined it. He had built a wall around the money. Not because he distrusted me, because he understood how quickly money could become an expectation. Why did he put this in the trust? Rebecca looked at me. I believe Thomas was concerned about protecting you from pressure, from whom anyone. I looked at the paragraph again. Did he specifically mention Melissa? No. That mattered. Thomas hadn't written the provision because he believed his daughter was dishonest. He had written it because he understood that circumstances could make honest people desperate. A person facing debt could look at a future inheritance differently from someone living comfortably. Desperation could turn possibility into certainty. I thought about Melissa, her tears, her fear, her desperation. And suddenly I felt something unexpected. Compassion, not permission, compassion. I understood why she had done what she did, but understanding didn't make it acceptable. Rebecca continued reading. There is another part you need to understand. She turned several pages. If a beneficiary attempts to assign or pledge an anticipated interest, the trustee can require independent review and, depending on the circumstances, restrict or suspend certain administrative rights. I frowned. Administrative rights, access to information, certain requests, participation in decisions. So Melissa could actually lose influence over the trust because she tried to control it. Potentially. I stared at her. That was almost painfully ironic. She thought she was getting closer to the money. Yes. She may have been pushing herself farther away from it. Yes. I leaned back. Thomas had always been patient. He believed consequences should teach people rather than destroy them. I remembered a conversation we'd had years earlier about Melissa's first major financial mistake. She had spent too much on a new car. When she realized she couldn't afford the payments, she called Thomas. I expected him to write a check. Instead, he told her, "I'll help you make a plan." She was furious. "You're my father." "I know. Why won't you just help me? I am helping you. You're making me fix it myself." That is part of helping. At the time, I thought he was too hard on her. Now I understood. He had always believed love and consequences could exist together. I looked at Rebecca. What happens now? That depends on what the evidence shows. Melissa is meeting people in Dallas today. I know. Can they make any claim against the trust? Not if the trust terms are enforced. What if she told them I would cooperate? That does not create your consent. What if she signed something herself? That doesn't bind you. I felt my shoulders loosen. For the first time, the possibility of losing everything no longer frightened me, because I realized there was nothing to lose in the way Melissa imagined. The trust was intact. The shares were intact. My house was intact. My authority was intact. What had been damaged was something much more difficult to repair. Trust between a mother and daughter. I looked at Rebecca. Did Thomas know I would be the one controlling this? Yes. Why he named you as the person with authority during your lifetime? I swallowed. Why me? Rebecca smiled. Because he trusted you. Those words hit harder than anything else. I looked down at the trust. For years I had thought Thomas had left me a financial cushion, but he had left me a decision. He had trusted me to decide what happened next. Not Melissa. Not Eric. Me. That realization changed the way I saw the entire situation. I didn't have to choose between revenge and surrender. There was another option. Boundaries. I could protect the trust without destroying my daughter. I could refuse to pay her debts without wishing her failure. I could tell her no without stopping loving her. And I could let her experience the consequences of her own decisions. Rebecca closed the folder. I recommend that we formally document your position. What would that say? That you have not authorized Melissa or Eric to represent you in any trust-related matter. Good. That all inquiries made on your behalf without written authorization should be disregarded. Good. and that the trustee should communicate directly with you and your legal counsel. Yes. Rebecca prepared the letter. I signed it. My real signature. The one I had used for 68 years. No practice sheet. No photocopy. No hidden intention. Just my name. Vivian Cooper. I looked at it afterward. Something about seeing my signature on that page felt strangely powerful. For the first time, it wasn't evidence of what someone else wanted from me. It was evidence that I was choosing for myself. Rebecca placed the document in the file. There's one more issue. What the Dallas meeting? I looked at her. If Melissa has already represented your future interest to a lender, there may be questions about what exactly she said. Can we find out? Legally, we can review anything provided to us by the relevant parties or discovered through legitimate channels. I don't want to spy on her. We won't. I just want the truth. Then let the process uncover it. I nodded. That afternoon, I received an email from the trust administrator. The message was brief. They had documented my formal statement. No one other than me and Rebecca was authorized to communicate on my behalf. I forwarded it to myself and saved a copy. Then I sat at my kitchen table. The house was quiet. I made tea. I didn't know where Melissa was. I didn't know what was happening in Dallas. But for the first time, I wasn't helpless. At 4:18 p.m., my phone rang. Melissa, I answered. Mom. Yes. Are you with Rebecca? Yes. She sighed. I figured. Where are you, hotel? Did the meeting happen? Yes. How did it go? Bad. I waited. They wouldn't move forward. I closed my eyes. Why? Because they contacted the trust administrator, and they were told I don't have authority. I said nothing. Mom, did you do that? Yes. You could have waited. No. Why? Because you were making decisions involving my property without my permission. I wasn't taking anything. You were using it to support financing. I was trying to keep the company alive. That's not your decision to make with my trust. She began crying. I know. For a moment, I wanted to comfort her. Then I remembered the airport, the suitcase, the copied signatures, the months of questions. I kept my voice calm. Melissa, I believe you were scared. I am. I believe you thought you were protecting your family. I was. But you crossed a line. She didn't argue. That silence told me more than any confession could. Mom. Yes. Are you going to take me out of the trust? The question hurt. Not because I had considered it. Because she was still thinking about the trust. I answered carefully. I haven't decided anything about your future inheritance. Please don't punish me. This isn't punishment. Then what is it? Protection. From me, I looked toward Thomas's photograph. From anyone who might pressure me. She began to cry. I softened my voice. That includes you. She didn't speak for several seconds. Then she whispered, Dad would hate me. No. You don't know that. I do. How? Because your father loved you. She sobbed. And because he believed people could make terrible decisions without becoming terrible people. The silence afterward was heavy. But he also believed people had to face their choices. I know. Then face this one. How? Start by telling the truth. She breathed shakily. I will. Not just to me. I knew what I meant. To the people in Dallas. Another silence. Then, okay. We ended the call. I remained at the table for a long time. Outside, the sun was beginning to set. The same sunset that Thomas and I had watched countless times through the kitchen window. I opened the trust folder again. The clause was still there. Plain, unemotional, protective. Thomas had written it years before anyone needed it. He had not known this exact day would come. But he had understood people. He had understood money. And most of all, he had understood me. The protection he left behind was not a weapon I could use against my daughter. It was a boundary I could use to protect myself. And I finally realized something that changed everything. Melissa had spent weeks trying to convince other people that her future inheritance was already part of her life. But Thomas had made sure the opposite was true. Her future remained her future. My present remained mine. And for the first time since the airport, I felt strong enough to keep it that way. I went to Dallas. I never intended to go to Dallas. The morning after Melissa's meeting fell apart, I woke with one thought I couldn't shake. I needed to know what had been said in that room. Not what Melissa remembered, not what she wanted me to believe, not what Eric had told her. I needed facts. By 9 o'clock, I was sitting across from Rebecca in her office again. "I want to go," I said. She looked up from her computer. "Go where, Dallas?" Rebecca leaned back. "Why? Because this started there. That doesn't mean you need to be there. I know. And you understand that confronting Melissa emotionally could make things worse. I'm not going there to confront her. What are you going there for?" I thought about the airport, the suitcase beside me, the message on my phone. "Please find your own way home. I want to stand in the room where my daughter used my future to negotiate her present." Rebecca studied me. "You're serious?" "Yes." She was quiet for several seconds. Then she asked, "Do you want me to come with you?" I hadn't expected that. "Yes, then we do this properly." By noon, Rebecca had arranged a legitimate meeting with representatives connected to the Airline transaction. She made it clear that I was the trustee authority and that I wanted clarification regarding any discussions involving the Cooper family trust. No threats, no accusations, no dramatic confrontation, just facts. I booked the next available flight. As I packed my suitcase, I paused. For a second, the sight of it brought me back to the airport. The same suitcase, the same blue blouse, the same camera. I almost laughed. "Not this time," I whispered. This time I knew exactly where I was going, and nobody else was carrying my documents. At Richmond International, Denise was working near the same counter. She saw me immediately. Her eyes widened. "You're traveling again?" "Yes." "Dallas." I smiled. "Yes." She looked at my suitcase. "Same one, unfortunately." She laughed. "I was hoping you'd come back someday under better circumstances." "So was I." She stepped around the counter and hugged me. It surprised me, but I hugged her back. "Dad was thrilled I talked to you," she said. "Tell him thank you. He said your husband would be proud." I swallowed. "That means more than you know." Before I left for the gate, Denise squeezed my arm. "Take care of yourself." "I will." This time I walked through the airport carrying my own ticket, my own identification, my own documents, my own decisions. The flight to Dallas was long enough for me to think about everything that had happened. I remembered Melissa at 19, Melissa crying over her first apartment, Melissa holding my hand at Thomas's funeral, Melissa asking me what the trust was worth. I didn't know which version of my daughter was real. Maybe all of them were. Maybe a person could love you deeply and still make selfish choices. That was a painful truth, but it was one I needed to accept. When we landed, Rebecca and I went directly to the hotel. The meeting was scheduled for the following morning. I expected to be nervous. Instead, I felt strangely calm. That evening, I opened Thomas's camera. I hadn't looked through the old photographs in years. There were hundreds. Melissa at the beach, Thomas beside an airplane, our house before the maple tree grew tall, our first Christmas after moving to Richmond. A blurry photograph of me laughing in the kitchen. I stopped there. Thomas had taken it. I remembered that day. He had been trying to photograph a pie. Instead, he caught me laughing at something Melissa had said. I smiled. Maybe that was what memory did. It reminded you that a family could contain beautiful moments without being perfect. The next morning, Rebecca and I entered the corporate conference center at 10. A woman named Karen Mitchell greeted us. She was the senior legal representative for the transaction. Beside her sat a financial advisor and another attorney. Everyone stood when I entered. "Mrs. Cooper." I shook Karen's hand. "Thank you for meeting with me. We're glad you came." I sat down. Rebecca sat beside me. Karen opened a folder. "We want to be very clear that no one at this company believed Ms. Grant had authority to transfer trust assets." I nodded. "Good. She represented herself as your daughter and said she was helping you understand the pending transaction." "That part is true. She also stated that you were considering allowing her to participate in future financial planning." I felt my jaw tighten. I was not. Karen nodded. We understand that now. I looked at the financial advisor. What exactly did she ask for? He glanced at the attorney before answering. She wanted information regarding the potential value of the legacy equity. Why she indicated that her family was experiencing financial difficulties and that she expected a future distribution from the trust. There it was, the words I had feared. Expected future distribution. I asked, did she say she owned the shares? No. Did she say she controlled them? No. Then what did she tell you? He hesitated. She asked whether the future economic interest could be acknowledged as part of a broader financing discussion. I looked at Rebecca. She gave a slight nod. Exactly what we suspected. Did you agree? No. Why not? Karen answered. Because we required formal confirmation from the trustee. I breathed out. Thank you. Then the financial advisor added something. She also suggested that you might be willing to participate. My hands folded together. Did she provide evidence? No. Then why did she say it? We assumed she was speaking based on family discussions. I felt something sharp in my chest. There had been no family discussion. Not one. Melissa had made assumptions and presented them as possibilities. Those possibilities had become part of financial conversations. I looked at Karen. Did she mention my husband? Yes. What did she say? She described him as the founder of the original company and referenced the family's long-term connection to the business. That was true. Then she said something else. She told us you had been managing the family financial affairs since his death. I frowned. I have. She implied you were considering transferring more responsibility to her. I was not. Karen nodded. We understand that now. Rebecca placed a document on the table. This is Vivian Cooper's formal authorization record. Karen reviewed it. Thank you. I leaned forward. I want something understood clearly. Everyone looked at me. My daughter may someday receive a benefit from this trust, but she does not own it today. No one interrupted. She cannot pledge it. No. She cannot promise it. No. She cannot speak for me. No. And she cannot use my name to create financial expectations. Karen nodded. We agree. I felt the tension in my shoulders begin to release. Then the conference room door opened. I knew who it was before I turned. Melissa. She stopped when she saw me. Her face went pale. Mom, I stood. For a second, neither of us moved. She looked exhausted. Her hair was pulled back carelessly. She wore the same dark blazer I had seen her wear in countless family photographs. But she looked older than 42. Much older. I didn't know you were coming. I know. Her eyes moved toward Rebecca, then toward the people around the table. I can explain. I know. She swallowed. I didn't think you'd actually come. Neither did I. She stepped inside. Karen gestured toward the empty chair. Please sit. Melissa sat. Her hands trembled. I wanted to reach across the table. I didn't. Not yet. Karen explained that the company had paused any discussions involving the trust because my authorization was required. Melissa nodded. I understand. I looked at her. Do you? She looked down. Yes. Then tell them what you told me. She glanced at me with that you expected future family wealth. Her face reddened. I said there could be future assets. Whose? She hesitated. Mom's. And whose after that mine? I waited. Someday, she whispered. Someday, I repeated. I could see the pain in her eyes, but I could also see something else. Shame. For the first time, Melissa looked less like someone trying to win, and more like someone finally realizing what she had done. The financial advisor cleared his throat. We have no interest in interfering with family matters. We only need clarity. I nodded. You have it. Then Karen asked the question I had been dreading. Mrs. Cooper, are you considering allowing your daughter any role in the trust? I looked at Melissa. She looked back at me. Once I would have answered immediately. Anything to relieve her fear. Anything to make the room comfortable. But I remembered the airport, the copied signature, the hidden documents, the months of planning. No, I said. Melissa's eyes filled with tears. I continued. Not at this time. The words weren't cruel. They weren't punishment. They were honest. Karen nodded. Understood. Melissa lowered her head. I watched her shoulders shake. Then I heard myself say something I hadn't planned. I am not here to destroy my daughter. Everyone looked at me. I am here because she made decisions involving my life without me. I turned toward Melissa. And I need her to understand that loving her does not mean surrendering my independence. She wiped her eyes. I understand. No, I said gently. You're beginning to understand. She nodded. That distinction mattered. After the meeting, Melissa followed me into the hallway. Mom. I turned. I am sorry. I know. I didn't think it would go this far. I believe you. She looked surprised. You do? Yes. Then why are you doing this? Because good intentions don't erase consequences. She looked down. I thought if I could keep Eric's company alive, everything would be okay. And if it wasn't, I don't know. That is the problem. She started crying. I wanted to hug her. Every instinct told me to. Instead, I waited. Eventually, she stepped forward. I opened my arms. She hugged me. I held her. But I did not promise money. I did not promise control. I did not promise to fix anything. I simply held my daughter. After a moment, she whispered against my shoulder. I'm sorry I left you there. I closed my eyes. That hurt more than you know. I was ashamed. You should have told me. I was afraid. I know. We separated. Melissa looked at me. Are you going to forgive me? I took a breath. Eventually. She nodded through tears. I'll wait. I almost smiled. That's something you can learn to do. She laughed weakly. For the first time in weeks, the sound didn't hurt. As I walked away with Rebecca, I looked back once. Melissa was still standing in the hallway. She wasn't holding a contract. She wasn't holding my suitcase. She wasn't holding my future. For the first time, she was simply standing there as my daughter. And strangely, that felt like the beginning of something. Not forgiveness, not yet, but truth. And sometimes truth is the first place healing has to begin. The lie that broke me. The meeting in Dallas should have been the moment everything ended. Instead, it became the moment I finally understood what had been happening inside my daughter's mind. After we left the conference room, Melissa asked if we could talk somewhere private. Rebecca looked at me. I nodded. We found a quiet seating area near the hotel lobby. Melissa sat across from me, twisting a tissue between her fingers. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Then she said, I didn't know how to tell you. You've said that before. I know. You keep saying you didn't know how to tell me. I didn't. I looked at her. You knew how to ask about the trust. She lowered her eyes. You knew how to contact the administrator. Silence. You knew how to make a reservation. Nothing. You knew how to buy a ticket to Dallas. Her eyes filled with tears. But somehow you didn't know how to tell your mother the truth. I was scared. I know. She looked up. Do you? Yes. Then why does it feel like you hate me? That question broke something inside me. Not because it was true. Because it revealed how far apart we had become. I don't hate you. Then why won't you help me? There it was. The question I had been expecting. I folded my hands in my lap. Because helping you isn't the same thing as saving you. She stared at me. I don't understand. I've been rescuing you for years. Her expression changed. I never asked you to. I almost laughed. You've asked me many times. I asked for help. And I gave it. You could have said no. I should have. She looked hurt. Mom. No, Melissa. Listen. I had spent 2 days preparing myself for this conversation. Not because I wanted to punish her. Because I wanted to stop lying to both of us. I helped you with college. I know. I helped with the house. I know. I helped when Eric's business struggled. I know. And every time I told myself it was because I could afford it. She wiped her eyes. But there was another reason. What I loved being the person you came to. Melissa looked confused. I loved knowing you needed me. I swallowed. That sounds terrible. It doesn't. It does. No. She shook her head. It sounds like a mother. I looked at her. But somewhere along the way, I taught you that whenever life became difficult, I would make the difficulty disappear. She didn't answer. I thought I was giving you security. I continued. Maybe I was teaching you dependence. Melissa looked down at the floor. I never thought of it that way. Neither did I. A long silence passed. Then she whispered, I didn't want your money. I looked at her. You used it as part of a financing conversation. I wanted time. For what? To fix Eric's company. Why? Because people depend on him. People depend on you, too. She looked confused. What do you mean, you? I pointed gently toward her chest. Your life. Your choices. Your future. She looked away. I thought if the company failed, we'd lose everything. What would you have lost? Our house? Possibly. Our savings? Possibly. Our reputation? Maybe. Our marriage? I was quiet. Then I asked, and what would you have gained by using my trust? She hesitated. Time. Exactly. I leaned back. You were trying to buy time with something that wasn't yours. Her face crumpled. I know. I watched her cry. For years I had believed my daughter's greatest fear was failure. Now I realized it was shame. She didn't want to be the woman whose husband's company collapsed. She didn't want friends to know they were struggling. She didn't want to sell their house. She didn't want to admit she needed help. So she looked toward the one place where she had always found rescue. Me. And this time I had nothing to offer her except the truth. I thought you'd understand, she whispered. I do understand. Then why won't you help? Because I understand exactly why I shouldn't. She looked at me through tears. I thought you would be proud if I saved everything. Melissa. I would be proud if you faced the truth. She said nothing. Your father's company didn't survive because he avoided difficult decisions. I paused. He survived because he made them. She looked toward the window. Dad would hate what I did. No, you keep saying that, because it's true. He would be disappointed. Yes. She nodded slowly. But he would still love you. She began crying again. I reached across the small table and took her hand. This time I didn't hesitate. I love you too. Her fingers tightened around mine. But I won't lie for you. I understand. I won't sign something I don't understand. I know. I won't let you use my future to solve your present. She nodded. And I won't abandon you either. She looked up. What does that mean? It means I'll help you understand your options. Her face changed. Financially, no. The disappointment appeared immediately. I didn't soften it. I can help you find a financial counselor. I can help you review a budget. I can help you understand what selling assets or restructuring debt might mean. I paused. But I won't write a check simply because you're afraid. She looked down. That's different. Yes. Mom, what if we really lose everything? Then you rebuild. How like everyone else? Her voice trembled. I don't know how. Then learn. That was when she finally looked at me differently. Not as a bank. Not as an answer. As her mother. I think I've forgotten how she said. I squeezed her hand. Then start remembering. We sat together for several minutes. Then Melissa said something that surprised me. There was another lie. I felt my stomach tighten. What lie? She took a deep breath. I told the advisors you were beginning to have trouble managing things. I stared at her. What I didn't say you were incompetent. That isn't what I asked. I said you were overwhelmed. You said I was becoming overwhelmed. Yes. And that you were helping me. Yes. Why? She closed her eyes. Because they wanted reassurance that I would eventually be able to participate. In my finances. Yes. I pulled my hand away. That hurt more than the money. Much more. You told strangers I couldn't manage my own affairs. I was trying to make them believe there would be family continuity. Family continuity. I didn't know how else to explain why I knew so much. I stood. My legs felt unsteady. For years I had fought against becoming invisible after Thomas died. I had insisted on handling my own appointments, my own accounts, my own travel, my own home. And my daughter had quietly started telling strangers that I was losing my ability to manage my life. Did you believe it? Melissa looked horrified. No. Then why say it? Because I thought they wouldn't trust me otherwise. I stared at her. That was the deepest betrayal. Not that she wanted money, not that she was desperate. She had tried to make other people believe I was less capable than I was, so that her own authority would appear greater. I felt tears burn my eyes. You didn't just use my money. She whispered, I know. You used my age. I know. You used my dependence on you after your father died. I know. You made people believe I needed you to protect me. I know. I turned away. For several seconds I couldn't speak. I had survived losing Thomas. I had survived learning that my daughter had financial problems. I had survived the airport. But this hurt differently, because it touched something I had fought to protect, my dignity. Melissa began crying. Mom, I'm sorry. I looked at her. I believe you. Then please forgive me. I can forgive you. She looked hopeful. But forgiveness doesn't erase what happened. I know. And it doesn't give you back authority. I know. You're going to have to earn trust again. She nodded. How by telling the truth even when it costs you something? She wiped her face. I'll try. No. She looked at me. Don't try. I said it gently. Do it. She nodded. I will. We returned to Richmond the following afternoon. On the flight home, I thought about the woman who had stood beside her suitcase at the airport 3 days earlier. She had been humiliated, confused, afraid. But she had also been waiting for someone to tell her what to do. I wasn't that woman anymore. When we reached Richmond, Melissa didn't ask me to drive her home. She said she needed to think. That was the first healthy decision I had heard from her in weeks. I watched her leave the terminal alone. No suitcase of mine, no trust documents, no promises, just her own life. When I arrived home, I walked into Thomas's study. His photograph was still on the desk. I touched the frame. You were right, I whispered. I had spent years thinking protecting my daughter meant making sure she never fell. Thomas had understood something I hadn't. Sometimes love means letting someone feel the ground beneath their feet. That evening, Rebecca called. How did the conversation go? Hard. Did she admit anything? Yes. What she told the advisors, I was becoming overwhelmed. Rebecca was silent. I'm sorry. So am I. What do you want to do now? I looked around the quiet room. I want to change how things are managed. Permanently, yes. We can establish an independent successor trustee and formalize communication procedures. Do it. And Melissa, she remains a beneficiary. Rebecca paused. You're certain? Yes. After everything, yes. I thought about my daughter. I don't want to destroy her future. I took a breath. I just don't want her future controlling my present. Rebecca said nothing for a moment. Then, that sounds like the right decision. After we hung up, I walked into the kitchen. For the first time in weeks, I made dinner without checking my phone every few minutes. I cooked chicken, roasted vegetables, opened a bottle of sparkling water, and sat at the table where Thomas and I had spent thousands of ordinary evenings. The house was quiet, but it didn't feel empty. I finally understood something I wish I had understood years earlier. My daughter had not betrayed me because she stopped loving me. She betrayed me because fear convinced her that love gave her permission. And I had spent years confusing love with rescue. That night, I made a promise to myself. I would never again measure my worth by how many problems I could solve for someone else. I was still a mother, still generous, still capable of forgiveness. But I was also Vivian Cooper. And my life was not an inheritance waiting to happen. It was happening now. What I changed. The first thing I changed was not the trust. It was my own thinking. For years I had believed that being a good mother meant being available whenever Melissa needed me. If she called, I answered. If she needed money, I considered it. If she was frightened, I reassured her. If she made a mistake, I helped soften the consequences. I had called that love. Now I understood that love without boundaries can quietly become something else. Dependence. And sometimes dependence becomes entitlement before either person notices. 2 weeks after we returned from Dallas, I sat in Rebecca's office while she prepared the documents that would change how my estate was managed. Melissa knew what I was doing. I had told her. She didn't like it. But for once, she didn't argue. That alone told me something was changing. Rebecca placed a document in front of me. This establishes an independent successor trustee. I read the first page carefully. Who is it? A professional fiduciary named Karen Whitmore. Do I know her? No. And that's part of the reason I recommended her. I smiled faintly. No family. No family. Good. Rebecca smiled. She has no emotional stake in the outcome. I signed. My signature looked different from the copied versions Melissa had practiced beside. It was mine. Steady, intentional. Then came the changes to my financial authorizations. Melissa would no longer have access to certain accounts. Her name would be removed from the emergency financial contact list. Any future communication regarding the trust would have to come directly from me or Rebecca. No verbal permission, no informal arrangements, no assumptions. Everything would be documented. When I finished, I put the pen down. That feels strange. Why? Because I never thought I'd need to protect my finances from my own daughter. Rebecca's expression softened. You're not protecting them from your daughter. I looked at her. You're protecting them from anyone's poor decisions. I nodded. That was easier to accept. Still painful, but easier. The harder decision came afterward. What about Melissa's inheritance? Rebecca closed the folder. You have options. I know. You could reduce it. I could. You could remove her as a beneficiary entirely. I know. She waited. I stared out the window. A delivery truck was parked across the street. A man in a blue uniform carried boxes into a building. Ordinary life. That was what I wanted. Not revenge. Not a dramatic courtroom battle. Not the satisfaction of watching my daughter lose everything. I wanted ordinary life again. I'm not disinheriting her. Rebecca nodded. Are you certain? Yes. Why? Because I don't want my anger deciding what Thomas's money means. Rebecca didn't respond. I continued. Melissa did something wrong. She needs consequences. But I don't believe consequences require me to erase her from the family. That is a reasonable position. I want her to have a future. Rebecca smiled. Just not one she controls today. Exactly. That afternoon I called Melissa. She answered immediately. Mom. Hi. Is everything okay? I finished the trust changes. She became quiet. What changes? I appointed an independent successor trustee. I heard her exhale. Okay. I also removed your access to my financial accounts. Another silence. Okay. And no one will be allowed to communicate on my behalf without written authorization. I understand. She sounded different. Not angry. Maybe tired. I'm not removing you as a beneficiary. She inhaled sharply. Thank you. But listen to me. I am. This doesn't mean everything goes back to the way it was. I know. You don't get to ask me for money whenever you're scared. I know. You don't get to tell other people what you expect to inherit. I know. And you don't get to make decisions involving my finances because you think you're helping. I know, Mom. I paused. Do you? Yes. How? Because I almost lost you. The words stopped me. She continued. Not financially. Her voice cracked. As my mother. I closed my eyes. That was never what I wanted. I know. I thought if I could fix everything with money, nobody would know how bad things were. Who were you trying to protect? Everyone. Yourself? Yes. Eric? Yes. The employees? Yes. I sighed. And me? She hesitated. Yes. How I thought if everything stayed stable, you wouldn't have to worry. I sat down. Melissa. I was already worried. I know. You just didn't let me worry about the right things, she cried quietly. I'm sorry. I believe you. We remained silent. Then she said, Eric and I are selling the house. I hadn't expected that. You are? Yes. Why we can't afford it. I felt a wave of sadness. That must be difficult. It is. But we're going to survive. I smiled. That sounds like a good thing. We've hired someone to help us restructure the business. Good. We're selling some equipment. Good. And I'm going back to work full-time. You already have a job. I mean really working. I'm taking on extra responsibility. I smiled again. Good. She laughed softly. You keep saying good. Because I'm proud of you. Even after everything. Yes. There was another silence. Then she asked, Are you angry? Yes. The honesty surprised her. I thought you would say no. I am angry. At me, yes. She breathed in slowly. But I'm also proud that you're finally facing this. I don't know how to feel about that. You don't have to know yet. That conversation ended differently from our previous calls. No pleading, no promises, no requests for money. Just two women acknowledging that something had broken, and something might eventually be rebuilt. A month later, Melissa and Eric sold their house. They moved into a smaller rental outside Richmond. The construction business was reduced dramatically. Eric let several employees go, which hurt Melissa deeply. But he kept the company alive. Not because of my money, because he restructured it. It wasn't the happy ending she had imagined. It was a real one. Some things had to shrink before they could become healthy. During that period, Melissa started attending counseling. She never told me every detail. I didn't ask. She said she was learning why she always felt responsible for appearing successful. She had spent years comparing herself to friends, people with larger homes, newer cars, better vacations, more impressive careers. She had become terrified of being seen as a failure. That fear had driven almost every decision surrounding the trust. One afternoon, she came to my house. She stood on the porch holding a small paper bag. What is that? I asked. Something for you. She handed it to me. Inside was a framed photograph. I pulled it out. It was an old picture of Thomas, Melissa, and me at Virginia Beach. The same trip I remembered from the trust office. But this version had been professionally restored. I looked at my daughter. I found the original in an old box. She smiled. I thought you might want it. I touched the frame. Thank you. She stood there awkwardly. Can I come in? Of course. We sat in the kitchen. No paperwork, no financial questions, no discussion about the trust, just coffee. That was new. After a while, Melissa said, I want to ask you something. My heart tightened automatically. What? Did you ever think about cutting me out completely? I didn't lie. Yes. She nodded. I understand. But I decided that wasn't what I wanted. Why? Because I don't want your future inheritance to be a weapon. She looked confused. How could it be a weapon? Because if I took it away just to hurt you, I would still be allowing money to control our relationship. She stared at me. So what happens? You may inherit someday. Someday. Yes. She smiled sadly. I think I finally understand that word. I smiled too. Good. She looked down at her coffee. I don't deserve your trust yet. No. She nodded. But I want to earn it. That matters more than an apology. She looked at me. How do I do that? Start small. Like what? Tell me the truth when it's uncomfortable. She smiled. I can do that. Don't promise. She laughed. Right. Just do it. We talked for another hour. Before she left, she hugged me. This time the hug felt different. There was no desperation in it, no hidden request, no expectation, just my daughter holding her mother. After she left, I stood at the window and watched her car disappear down the street. I felt something I hadn't expected. Peace. Not complete peace. There were still scars. I didn't suddenly forget the airport. I didn't forget the copied signatures. I didn't forget the way she had allowed strangers to believe I was becoming incapable of managing my own life. But I no longer needed those memories to punish her. They had already taught me what I needed to learn. That evening, I opened Thomas's trust file. The clause remained unchanged. The future remained protected. Melissa remained a beneficiary, and I remained in control of my own life. I thought about the day at the airport, how small I had felt standing beside that suitcase, how certain I had been that my daughter had abandoned me. In a way she had, but that abandonment had forced me to discover something I had forgotten. I did not need anyone to carry me. I could carry my own suitcase, my own documents, my own decisions, my own future. And perhaps that was the greatest gift Thomas had left me. Not the shares, not the house, not the trust. The reminder that love was never supposed to require me to disappear. I closed the folder. Then I turned off the light. For the first time in a long time, I went to bed without wondering what Melissa might need from me tomorrow. I wondered instead what I might want for myself. And that question felt wonderfully unfamiliar. The second suitcase. 6 months passed after the day I changed the trust. At first I thought the silence between Melissa and me would be unbearable. Instead, it taught me something. Silence could be peaceful. It didn't always mean punishment. Sometimes it meant two people were finally learning how to stop saying things they didn't mean. Melissa didn't call me every day anymore. She didn't ask about my bank accounts. She didn't ask what the trust was worth. She didn't ask whether I had changed my will again. Instead, she called on Sunday afternoons. Sometimes she told me about work. Sometimes she complained about grocery prices. Once she called because she had burned a pot of chili and wanted to know how to get the smell out of the kitchen. I laughed so hard I had to sit down. "That's why you called me, I knew you'd know. Open the windows." I did. Then wash the curtains. "Mom, what I called because I missed you." That stopped me. "I missed you too." Those conversations became our new routine. Small, ordinary, real. Eric's construction company survived, but it became much smaller. He sold several pieces of equipment, renegotiated contracts, and stopped taking projects that required enormous upfront costs. The business wasn't impressive anymore, but it was stable. Melissa told me that was the first time in years she had stopped pretending everything was bigger than it was. "We were trying to look successful," she admitted one afternoon. "You were." "No." She shook her head. "We were trying to look successful. There was a difference." Their house had sold below the price Melissa originally hoped for. She was embarrassed about it. I told her there was nothing embarrassing about selling a house you couldn't comfortably afford. She said that was easy for me to say. Maybe it was, but I reminded her that Thomas and I had once lived in a tiny 2-bedroom rental with a broken furnace. "We started somewhere," I told her. "And you were happy not every day." She laughed. "That's probably the most honest answer you've ever given me." I smiled. We were learning honesty together. One Saturday morning, Melissa came over carrying 2 coffees. She set one in front of me. Caramel latte. I looked at it suspiciously. "You're trying to spoil me. You deserve it. That's dangerous language." She laughed. We sat at the kitchen table. After a few minutes, she said, "I have something to tell you." My heart reacted before my mind did. "What?" "I got promoted." I smiled. "That's wonderful. It comes with more responsibility." "Are you ready?" "I think so." "You think?" She laughed. "I am." I reached across the table. "I'm proud of you." She smiled. Then her expression changed. "Mom, can I ask you something?" I waited. "Would you ever take another trip with me?" The question surprised me. "Where, Charleston?" For a moment neither of us spoke. The word carried too many memories. The airport, the suitcase, the text, the woman who had recognized my last name. I looked at Melissa. She seemed nervous. "I know what you're thinking. What, that I don't deserve another trip?" I wasn't thinking that. "What were you thinking, that Charleston has terrible timing?" She laughed. "So that's a yes." I didn't say that. You didn't say no. I smiled. "Maybe." She nodded. "I'll take maybe." A few weeks later, we began planning. This time, everything was different. I booked my own flight. Melissa booked hers. We chose the hotel together. Each of us received our own confirmation. I printed mine. She printed hers. Then she handed me the papers. "Check everything." I laughed. You're making fun of me. I'm learning. We both knew what she meant. The night before the trip, I packed my suitcase. I stood in my bedroom looking at it for several minutes. The same suitcase from Richmond International Airport. I had considered buying a new one, but eventually I decided not to. That suitcase had become a symbol of something I needed to remember. Not abandonment, recovery. I opened it. This time I packed slowly. 3 dresses, 2 pairs of shoes, my medication, a sweater, Thomas's old camera, and a small notebook. No trust documents, no legal papers, no copies of signatures, just my things. When I finished, I closed the zipper. Then I smiled. The next morning, Melissa arrived at 7. She stood at my front door. You ready? I picked up the suitcase. I am. She reached for it. I'll get that. I held on. No. She stopped. I smiled. I can carry my own suitcase. She looked at me for a second. Then she smiled. I know. We drove to Richmond International Airport together. The same airport. The same departure lanes. The same glass doors. But I was different. When Melissa pulled toward the curb, she looked at me. Do you want me to park? I laughed. Yes. Good. She parked in the garage. We walked inside together. No disappearing. No secrets. No mysterious reservation. At the airline counter, Denise wasn't working that morning. Part of me was disappointed. I wanted to thank her properly. But then another agent checked us in. Everything was normal. Beautifully normal. While we waited near the gate, Melissa looked at me. Mom? Yes, I need to tell you something. My stomach tightened. She laughed. Not about money. I smiled. That's reassuring. She took a breath. I've been thinking about that day. The airport. Yes. I nodded. What about it? I used to think the worst thing I did was leave you there. I looked at her. But that's not the worst thing, is it? No. The worst thing was making you feel like you couldn't trust yourself. I didn't answer. She continued. I told people you were overwhelmed. Yes. I made decisions without you. Yes. I treated your future like it was already part of my life. Yes. She looked down. I've been ashamed. I know. But I'm not asking you to make me feel better. That sentence mattered. She looked at me. I just want you to know I understand what I did. I reached for her hand. That's enough for today. She squeezed it. Then our boarding group was called. We stood. Melissa reached for her suitcase. I picked up mine. We walked toward the gate. This time, nobody was left behind. Charleston was beautiful. The first afternoon, we walked along the waterfront. Melissa took photographs with her phone. I used Thomas's old camera. At dinner, we laughed about how different the trip was from the one I thought I had been promised. No secret flights, Melissa said. No hidden envelopes. No financial meetings. No forged signatures. I raised an eyebrow. Don't joke about that one. She winced. Sorry. Then we laughed. Later that night, we sat on the hotel balcony. The city lights shimmered in the distance. Melissa looked at me. Can I ask you something? You're becoming very fond of questions. I get that from you. What questions? I smiled. What do you want to ask? Do you forgive me? I looked out at the lights. I had asked myself that question many times. Forgiveness had seemed impossible immediately after the airport. Then over time it became less like a decision and more like a process. I forgive you for what happened, I said. She nodded. But I won't pretend it didn't happen. I don't want you to. Good. She looked down at her hands. I thought forgiveness meant everything went back to normal. No. What does it mean? It means I don't need to punish you anymore. She looked at me. And trust, that takes longer. I know. She smiled. That's fair. We sat quietly. Then she said, I don't want your money. I looked at her. Not now, not ever. She smiled. I wouldn't complain if you left me something someday. I laughed. Honesty. I'm trying. I appreciate it. She leaned back. But I don't want to plan my life around it. Those words made my eyes sting. That I said is what I wanted to hear. The next morning, we visited a small cafe. We walked through the historic district. We bought souvenirs. We argued playfully over whether we needed another dessert. It was ordinary, and ordinary had never felt so precious. On our last evening, Melissa gave me an envelope. I stared at it. She laughed nervously. "It's not trust paperwork. I hope not. Open it." Inside was a handwritten letter. I read it slowly. She had written about the airport, about the lies, about fear, about how she had mistaken my generosity for an endless resource. But the final paragraph made me stop. She wrote that she didn't want to become the kind of person who measured her mother's life by what she might inherit from it. I folded the letter carefully. "This is beautiful. I didn't know how to say it out loud. You said it now." She nodded. Then she asked, "Will you keep it forever?" On the flight home, Melissa fell asleep beside me. I looked at her. She looked peaceful. For years I had worried about protecting my daughter from every hardship. Now I understood something. She didn't need me to remove every obstacle. She needed the opportunity to become strong enough to cross them herself. When we landed in Richmond, Melissa picked up my suitcase before I could. I laughed. "What are you doing helping?" I let go. "All right." She carried it to the car. Before we drove away, I looked back at the airport terminal, the place where I had once stood alone, the place where an airline agent had recognized my last name. At the time, I thought the recognition was about Thomas. Now I understood it had also been about Vivian Cooper, a woman who had spent decades standing beside a successful husband, raising a daughter, managing a household, keeping books, and quietly supporting everyone she loved. I had spent years thinking my greatest value was what I could provide. The airport had taught me otherwise. My daughter had left me there thinking I was alone. Instead, I had found the courage to stand on my own. And now, months later, I was leaving that same airport beside her, not as her financial safety net, not as a woman waiting for someone else to decide what happened next, but as her mother. And this time, when Melissa reached for my suitcase, I let her carry it. Because there is a difference between being helpless and allowing someone you love to help. I finally knew the difference, and that knowledge had changed everything. The name she recognized. Almost a year had passed since the morning my daughter left me at Richmond International Airport. Sometimes I still thought about that day. Not with the same pain. Not anymore. The memory had changed shape. At first I remembered the humiliation, then the anger, then the questions. Why had Melissa lied? Why had she needed my identification? Why had she put those documents in my suitcase? Why had she believed my future belonged to her? But eventually, the airport became something else. It became the place where I had stopped waiting for someone else to tell me what my life was worth. And almost a year later, I found myself standing in that same airport again, alone. This time there was no daughter beside me, no secret itinerary, no hidden envelope, no mysterious financial meeting waiting at the other end. Just me, one suitcase, one boarding pass, and a trip I had planned entirely for myself. I was flying to Savannah for a long weekend. I had wanted to visit for years. Thomas and I had talked about going there after he retired. We never did. There was always another business problem, another bill, another family obligation, another reason to wait. After Thomas died, I told myself I would go someday. Then Melissa's problems began. Then the trust. Then Dallas. Then the long process of rebuilding our relationship. Somewhere along the way, I realized how easily someday becomes never. So I booked the trip. No one knew the details except Rebecca. I didn't need anyone's permission. That simple realization still felt new. I stood in the terminal looking at the departure board. My flight was on time. I smiled. Then I heard someone call my name. Mrs. Cooper. I turned. Denise Walker was standing several feet away in her airline uniform. For a moment we simply stared at each other. Then she smiled. "I knew that was you." I laughed. "I hoped I'd see you again." She walked over and hugged me. "You're traveling alone." "Yes." "Savannah." "Yes." She shook her head. "I remember the last time you traveled, so do I. And this time, This time, I'm going exactly where I intended to go. She smiled. Good. We walked toward the counter together. How's your father still complaining about younger mechanics? Then he's doing well. He is. I smiled. Tell him I said hello. I will. She looked at my suitcase. The famous suitcase. I laughed. I almost replaced it. Why didn't you? Because I've decided it deserves retirement after what it survived. Denise laughed. Then she became quieter. My father still talks about your husband. I know. He says Thomas would have been proud of you. I looked down. Those words still reached me. Thank you. Denise touched my arm. You know, when I recognized your last name that morning, I thought I was remembering someone else's story. What do you mean my father used to talk about Cooper Aviation, like it was the greatest company that ever existed? I smiled. He probably exaggerated. Probably. She laughed. But he always said Mr. Cooper was different, how he believed people mattered more than profits. I looked toward the windows. That sounds like Thomas. He also said your husband trusted one person completely. I smiled. Who, you? My throat tightened. I didn't always feel like he trusted me. He did. I nodded. Maybe that was the hardest part of losing someone. You spent years living beside them, knowing their habits, their moods, their jokes. But you never fully understand how they saw you until they're gone. Thomas had trusted me, even when I didn't trust myself. Especially then. Denise had to return to work, so we said goodbye. I watched her walk away. Then I sat near the gate. My flight was still 40 minutes away. I opened my purse and found Thomas's old camera. I had brought it because I wanted to photograph Savannah the way he might have. The camera was scratched now. The battery was temperamental. But it still worked. I turned it over in my hands. For years I had thought of the Cooper name as Thomas's name. He built the company. He signed the contracts. He negotiated the sale. He made the decisions. I was his wife, the woman who kept the books, the woman who supported him, the woman who raised our daughter. But the airport had changed something in me. The airline agent hadn't recognized Thomas standing beside me. She had recognized me. Vivian Cooper. And because of that recognition, I had discovered a part of my husband's life that had remained invisible to me. I discovered the trust, the shares, the protection, the clause, and eventually myself. The legacy shares were still in the trust. The acquisition had eventually moved forward under revised terms. The final value was significant. Not the exaggerated fortune Melissa had imagined, not some magical amount that could solve every problem, but enough to matter, enough to change the future. The independent trustee now handled the administrative side. Rebecca remained my attorney. Melissa remained a beneficiary. Nothing had been taken from her, but nothing had been given early, simply because she wanted it. That distinction had become one of the most important lessons of my life. A future inheritance was not a present paycheck. Love was not a financial obligation. And helping someone was not the same as rescuing them from every consequence. Melissa and I were better now. Not perfect. Better. She still called on Sundays. Sometimes we met for lunch. She had learned to ask before offering advice. I had learned to say no without feeling guilty. That may sound small. It wasn't. One Sunday, Melissa came over carrying a box. What is that? I asked. Dad's things. I looked at the box. What about them? I found some old papers. My stomach tightened for half a second. She noticed. Not trust papers. I laughed. Good. She smiled. I think I finally understand why you react to envelopes. That's fair. She put the box on the table. Inside were old photographs. Thomas standing beside an airplane. Thomas at a company picnic. Thomas holding Melissa when she was 6. Thomas and me on our first anniversary. We spent the afternoon going through them. At one point, Melissa held up a photograph of herself at 19. You remember this? Yes, I hated that haircut. I loved it. You were lying. Of course, she laughed. Then she became quiet. Mom. Yes. Do you ever regret not cutting me out of the trust? The question surprised me. No, even after what I did. No. Why? I thought carefully. Because I don't want your inheritance to determine whether I love you. She looked down. I don't deserve it. Maybe not today. She looked up. But that's not the point. What is the point is that I don't want to spend the rest of my life deciding your worth based on money. She nodded. I understand. I hope you do. I do. She smiled. And if someday I receive something from the trust, it will be because the trust says you should, not because I asked. Exactly. She nodded. Then she asked the question I had once feared. Would you leave the house to me? I smiled. No. She laughed. I had to ask. You'll have to survive. I will. And she was. She had built a smaller life, a more honest one. She and Eric were still married, though their relationship had changed. They no longer pretended to be financially invincible. Their business was smaller. Their home was smaller. Their expectations were smaller. But Melissa once told me they laughed more. Turns out she said we were exhausting ourselves trying to look successful. I told her I was glad she finally knew the difference between looking successful and being okay. On my flight to Savannah, I opened the letter she had written me in Charleston. I had carried it in my purse ever since. The final lines still made me emotional. She had written that she never wanted to look at me again and see a future inheritance instead of her mother. I folded the letter carefully. Then I looked out the airplane window. Clouds stretched beneath me. For the first time in years, I felt completely free. Not because I had become wealthy, not because the trust had been protected, not because Melissa had finally apologized. I felt free because I no longer believed I had to earn my right to make decisions. Age hadn't taken that away. Motherhood hadn't taken it away. Widowhood hadn't taken it away. And being generous had never required me to surrender it. When I landed in Savannah, I rented a car and drove to the historic district. I spent 3 days walking. I photographed old buildings. I ate at little restaurants. I sat beneath trees covered in Spanish moss. I talked to strangers. I bought myself a ridiculous souvenir mug. And I didn't call anyone to ask whether it was okay. On my final morning, I sat alone at a cafe and opened my notebook. At the top of the first page, I wrote things I still want to do. Then I began making a list. Visit Maine. See the Grand Canyon. Take a train through the mountains. Learn how to use the camera properly. Take a cooking class. Go back to Charleston. Maybe even visit Dallas someday. I smiled at that last one. Then I added another line. Stop waiting for someday. I closed the notebook. Thomas had left me money. He had left me a house. He had left me the trust. But those things were not his greatest inheritance. His greatest gift was the lesson that protection and control are not the same thing. He protected me so I could choose. And for years I had mistaken protection for something I needed someone else to provide. Now I understood. I could protect myself. I could love my daughter. I could forgive her. I could maintain boundaries, all at the same time. When I returned to Richmond, I stopped at the airport before going home. I didn't have to. I simply wanted to. I walked through the same entrance where I had once stood frightened and humiliated. I looked toward the counter where Denise had first recognized my last name. Cooper. A name that had once seemed to belong mostly to my husband. Now it belonged to me too. Not because of the money, not because of the company, because of everything I had lived through, everything I had survived, everything I had learned. I thought about the woman who had stood beside a suitcase that morning, convinced her daughter had abandoned her. She had been right, but she hadn't understood the whole story. Melissa had left me at the airport, and somehow that abandonment had led me back to myself. I picked up my suitcase and walked toward the exit. Nobody was waiting to tell me where to go. And for the first time in my life, I realized that wasn't frightening. It was freedom. I smiled as I stepped outside into the Virginia sunshine. My name was Vivian Cooper. I was 68 years old. I had one suitcase, and I still had a life to live. Kethuk Fan 15. Life Lesson and Final Reflection. Looking back now, I understand that the most valuable thing I inherited from Thomas was never the money. It was the courage to protect my own life. For years, I believed being a good mother meant making sacrifices whenever my daughter needed me. I thought saying yes proved how deeply I loved her. I thought rescuing someone from financial trouble was an act of kindness. But love without boundaries can create a dangerous pattern. When we constantly remove the consequences from someone else's choices, we may believe we are helping them. Sometimes, without realizing it, we are teaching them that someone else will always clean up the mess. Melissa didn't become entitled overnight. And I didn't create her mistakes alone. She made her choices. But I also had to admit that I had spent years making it easy for her to believe that my resources would always be available whenever life became difficult. The airport taught me another lesson. Being abandoned does not mean being powerless. Sometimes the moment someone walks away from you is the moment you discover that you are capable of standing without them. At 68, I learned that age does not mean surrendering your independence. Being a mother doesn't mean becoming someone's financial safety net. Forgiving someone doesn't mean giving them unlimited access to your life. And setting boundaries doesn't mean you stopped loving someone. Sometimes boundaries are what allow love to survive. I still love my daughter. I still hope she has a beautiful future. But now that future belongs to her. My present belongs to me. And perhaps that is the healthiest gift a parent can give an adult child, not a life without consequences, but the confidence to face those consequences and build something better. So I want to ask you something. If your own daughter or son left you at an airport after making plans behind your back, what would you have done? Would you have forgiven them? Would you have changed your trust? Would you have protected the relationship or walked away completely? Tell me your thoughts in the comments. And if you're watching from somewhere around the world, tell me where you are and what time it is there. I would genuinely love to know how far this story traveled. If Vivian's story meant something to you, subscribe to the channel for more emotional family stories about betrayal, forgiveness, boundaries, and finding strength when life doesn't turn out the way we expected. Sometimes the people we love teach us the hardest lessons. And sometimes the moment we think we've lost everything is the moment we finally find ourselves. There are some lessons in life that we only understand after they hurt us. Vivian learned that love does not mean saying yes to everything. For years, she believed that being a good mother meant protecting her daughter from every financial struggle, every mistake, and every painful consequence. She gave because she could. She rescued because she loved. But eventually she realized that constantly saving someone can prevent them from learning how to stand on their own. The hardest lesson was understanding that boundaries are not a form of rejection. They are a form of self-respect. Vivian did not stop loving her daughter when she refused to give her access to the family trust. She did not become cool when she said no. She simply stopped confusing love with responsibility for another adult's choices. And perhaps that is something many of us need to hear. You can love your children and still protect your finances. You can forgive someone and still remember what happened. You can give someone another chance without giving them unlimited access to your life. You can care deeply about someone's future without sacrificing your own present. Most importantly, it is never too late to choose yourself. Vivian was 68 when she discovered that lesson. She thought the airport was the place where her daughter abandoned her. Instead, it became the place where she discovered her own strength. Sometimes life takes away the person we thought we could depend on, only to show us that we were stronger than we ever realized. And sometimes the greatest inheritance isn't money, property, or possessions. It is the courage to live with dignity, the wisdom to set boundaries, and the strength to walk forward without waiting for someone else to decide your worth. If Vivian's story touched your heart, I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever had to choose between helping someone you love and protecting yourself? Would you have made the same decision Vivian made? Share your thoughts in the comments. And if you're watching from somewhere around the world, tell us where you are and what time it is there. If you enjoy emotional family stories about betrayal, forgiveness, second chances, and finding strength after heartbreak, please subscribe to the channel and stay with us for the next story. Because sometimes the chapter that breaks your heart is also the